unusual budget that matches that unusual time. So while I'm really expert in human services and the work that we do at DHS, I'm not expert in every part of the budget, but as a representative of the mayor, a member of her cabinet now for over 6 years, I'm going to do my best to give you sort of the broad brush. And then and together with Joe from the mayor's office of community relations, we'll take questions that you have and bring them back, send you back answers if there are things you have that we cannot answer. I know you have a busy agenda and it's a hot night, so I will try not to drone on. And if this is just like, yeah, no, you can motion. I can see some of you, not all of you, but I can see the commissioners. So you can say, keep rolling through it. But hopefully you'll find, if you're, I think, wonky government types, you will find some of this seriously exciting, I think, as I do. So giving just a little context, the budget, the mayor sort of coined this, she titles every budget as a fair shot budget, is one that is really honoring what people have sacrificed in terms of staying home, trying to make our community safer, and a lot of the loss that's happened as a result of COVID, with setting up our community for a strong recovery. And that's looking at our economic recovery, the academic recovery, understanding the learning losses that students have experienced over the course of the pandemic, as well as a strong recovery, taking into account the tolls on our physical and mental health. And so with the budget, there's really a double down by the mayor and her administration on our commitment to building back better and building back a more equitable DC. And so that it takes looking at what does this look like across all 8 wards, as well as working with within some of the challenges of what has been the financial impact to the district over the course of the pandemic, and as well as maximizing in every way possible the federal resources available to us so that we can reopen stronger. So some of the values that this budget embodies, and so the priorities that you'll see reflected through in a lot of like really creative programs and resources, and ways that the government is nimbly adapting to meet these this really unusual time, and are first taking care of the basic needs that our residents have for food, for shelter, to be able to stay in their housing, and make sure people have access to things they need to have their basic needs met. And that is very much the work that we do at the Department of Human Services every day. This also supports a citywide transition to distance learning, and then a partial return, and soon to be a full return to in-person learning safely. And so far, we've distributed more than $2 billion in federal and local unemployment benefits, and all of this building testing, tracing, and a vaccine program that we can all be proud of. And every district resident, as I'm over the age of 12, as I'm sure you know, has access to free vaccine, and that is really critical to doing what we need to do to get beyond this pandemic. So we are starting from what was a very strong financial position before the pandemic, and we have some work to do to catch up. And we had to take some serious reductions in our local budget and fill in where possible with federal spend. And so there are both sacrifices and some difficult decisions, again, as well as a strategic use of federal relief funds that have allowed us to avoid drastic cuts to public services, maintain our strong financial foundation, which is critical to the healthy economic future of our city and our growth. And as you'll see in today's presentation, making big investments and solutions to what have been some of our greatest challenges. So where we want to have a resilient economy, there's some slides in here that I'm going to skip through rather quickly, because you may not be you may, but you can also look some of this up if you are as concerned about which fund pays for what across all the different revenue streams. So we're going to skip ahead in the budget snapshot slide and sort of gross funds. We're going to stop, and I'm just going to say in these 2 slides, what you're going to see by cluster is that the biggest investments in the district's budget, both when you look at by appropriation as well as gross, are in education and health and human services. I think a lot of people believe that maybe it's in other areas, some of the areas that touch all residents, like picking infrastructure and trash, or development, but it's really public education and health and human services that are the biggest parts of the district budget. And I think that you see that throughout, and even bigger investments in those areas in the proposed budget, understanding where the needs are in our community. And we can keep scrolling to the next slide. And so you'll see that both in local and in federal, those major investments, again, in human services, and but also across, of course, all government to maintain the excellent government services that our residents have come to expect and should expect. So as we move on now to the next slide, there also is some significant capital development. This breaks that down by agency, and I'm not going to talk about all of the projects here, but I'll just in summary say that there's some of the things that you're going to be able to see throughout the budget are supports for businesses and residents who are hardest hit, access to safe, affordable housing, reducing gun violence, accelerating student learning and increasing access to childcare, reducing health inequities, and continuing to build a more inclusive economy. So those are the policy priorities in a more specific way than where I started, that really guide as we go into sort of the next sort of topical discussion of the budget. We have used some reserve funds and put some reserve funds back, and I'm not going to spend time on the cash flow parts of the budget, but so we'll go on into some of the, and we'll skip sort of the rescue plan fund source and go right into the next slide, which begins to get into some of the programmatic priorities. So this is, there are some one-time stimulus funds, and they're going towards some of our mobility and climate goals, some 2 to 3 year ramp up. So some of the things you'll see in the budget, while there's a one-time infusion of some federal resources, where the spend allows that we have a number of years that we're to avoid a fiscal cliff where we're spending a lot of money in one year that then is not available to sustain projects and services. We are anticipating about a 3-year recovery of our economy to be fully back on scale for growth. And through that, you'll see 2 to 3 years of funding to spread out those federal resources to avoid deep cuts to essential services, and also understanding how critical affordable housing is for so many of our residents. Major increases in accelerating our affordable housing goals in the production and preservation, as well as making sure that housing becomes available to residents who have none. So through the Homeward DC plan, there are major investments in our strategies that help people who are experiencing homelessness regain housing without returns to homelessness, preventing homelessness among residents whenever possible. And other parts of the homeless services continuum is outlined in our Homeward DC plan, as well as Building Blocks DC, addressing the gun violence that we've seen throughout our community, as well as other services. So going now to the next slide, some other key highlights, and we're gonna skip some of this allocation table and go skip to right here on education. Thank you. So in terms of, I talked about one of the key policy goals and priorities around the budget is really investing in learning, both recovery and acceleration. So some of the really important things to know that are in the budget, and this is major, is a 3.6% increase in the uniform per student funding formula, plus increased weights for English language learners and other at-risk students. So that puts more resources into schools and supporting students who would benefit from having more support at school. There's also $8 million to expand school-based mental health. I think we've all been reading and understand the toll that the pandemic has played on the mental health of lots of people, but particularly children, where they have not had as much socialization. And so there is major investments in school-based mental health, which for all DC public and DC public charter schools who need that, additional grants to charter schools so that they can be fully reopened for the next school year. There's $41 million that's allocated over 4 years for high impact tutoring. This is an evidence-based approach that's meant to accelerate student learning. So that will help us support our students be back on track at grade level where they've had some losses in learning during the pandemic. There's also $13 million allocated to provide more access to degrees, advanced degrees, affordable bachelor's and associate degrees, as well as workplace learning experiences for high demand careers in expanding some of those opportunities and internships, integrating them into our school system, as well as Advanced Technical Center, which will serve as a regional hub for some of this programming. $5.6 million to increase access to summer programming with academic enrichment, and $1.57 billion over 6 years for school modernization and small capital projects to address some of the overcrowding in some of our schools and to accelerate some the repairs and capital projects at Truesdale and Whittier elementary schools. And then, of course, we know how important technology is, more so than ever before. And there is $26.5 million to continue to provide laptops, tablets, or smartphones to seniors and youth in existing foster care, families who are enrolled in TANF and other public assistance programs, and returning citizens to allow them to be able to access and begin to close some of the digital divide. So a lot of really exciting investments in public education. Now moving on to talk about childcare, also major investments in supporting childcare. There are a number of federal grants as well as local investment. We know how important early learning is to long-time success of students and families. And so there's a number of resources that you'll see in the budget, incentives for childcare workers that will allow for retention, higher subsidy payments to our childcare centers, stabilization grants for childcare centers to help mitigate losses that they experience so that they don't close. We need them open so that people can have a place where their children can be, and high quality learning environments in childcare, and parents can work. So there's back to work childcare grants as well as a second round of access to quality grants to increase the number of quality and high quality early learning seats in DC, to improve both the affordability, supply, and quality of early learning environments that we offer. So a whole set of really important strategies around childcare in the budget. Next slide. So next I'm going to talk about some of the health. So there's investments in building a high quality network of care. So this is both supporting small business and residents who have health insurance premiums they have not been able to pay that are now in arrears, to ensure they continue to have access to health insurance, health care. There's $4.2 million to support 5 centers of excellence at Howard University Hospital. There's $16 million for a number of strategies that will advance health equity, including creating a new sobering center to divert lower risk cases from crowded ERs. And this, I think in the community that many of you represent, sometimes you're seeing that where there are people who cannot necessarily safely be taken somewhere, and there needs to be a place where they can go and sober up without being on the streets. And so we're really excited that initiatives with the Department of Behavioral Health, and it's going to benefit so many aspects of the city. We did years ago have that. There's supports for expansion of the mental health crisis response team and response for people with substance use disorders. Then there's also, of course, continuation of our COVID relief efforts with supporting ongoing testing, vaccines, isolation, quarantine, PPE, and other needs. So, and that's just a few things. There are others here as well, but we're really excited about those important investments in health. Moving on, skipped a few important things here. Oh no, I didn't, next slide. Okay, sorry, David. Affordable housing. Okay, we're gonna stop here for a moment and talk a little bit about affordable housing. I think you may have heard, really historic and exciting, there's $400 million devoted for investment in the Housing Production Trust Fund. What is also really exciting as someone who understands a lot what happens when there is not necessarily where there's affordable housing, but not necessarily enough subsidy that people who are at the very lowest income spectrum can access that housing. There's also $42 million for project sponsor-based vouchers so that more of this housing that's being developed is accessible to people with the lowest incomes, which is fantastic. This will allow the trust fund to meet its goal of the number of units it serves for people who are at that 0 to 30, while also bringing in more quantity for people who are at 30 to 50 and 50 to 80% of the area median income. So that's awesome. And we're really excited about that. And I saw some applause, and thank you for that. Share that sentiment for sure. There is $350 million. This is coming from the Federal Emergency Rental Assistance for a program called Stay DC, stands for Stronger Together, assisting you. This provides relief with rent. We can pay rent subsidies back for an entire year, as well as help people going forward for 3 months at a time for up to 2, allowing them to recertify, so up to 18 months total of rent assistance, so that people can stay in their housing and not enter homeless services because of income loss during COVID. That we are seeing many applications coming in. We've already paid out about $13 million since we launched about less than 6 weeks ago, this program. And we know that we have many applications still in the queue, but this is something that if you could help us let your constituents know about. We really want people to understand that if they're struggling with their rent, that we can help. That if they're at 80% or below of the area median income, even if they were higher earners before the pandemic and they need help with their rent, we can help them. We can help them with back rent 12 months, as well as utilities and other housing costs. We have to do our part to ensure we do not see an increase in homelessness. We have the resources for that to happen. But at this point, it becomes really connecting people who have a need to the program because the money is there. And if we see that we are spending this money down, there are resources that are likely to come behind to replenish those funds from the federal government, right? It's too early to tell what that might look like, but there's no reason why people should wait to get that help, because we can help them now. So there's additional money for the Housing Preservation Fund, 17 million for that. There is additional emergency and transitional shelter for survivors of domestic violence, $67 million, and to expand in that and other domestic violence services, very important, as there's likely some pent-up need for people who have been staying home in situations that they might need to flee as things are reopening. And so we are prepared for that. There is $113 million to rehabilitate and modernize some of our public housing, something that is also very important to do, because when that housing is not quality anymore, we see that there's no place for people who need that very affordable housing to go. There's some expanded emergency shelter that is serving LGBTQ plus residents who are adults. We have a number of programs that target youth who identify as LGBTQ, but we have not had any that specifically for adults. And for adults who may not feel comfortable in our adult system, we are excited to sort of fill that gap, particularly as it relates to people who may not want to identify as to put themselves in a box of going to a men's shelter or a women's shelter. So we're very happy to see that is a really important gap that we will fill in our homeless services system. We're investing heavily in permanent supportive housing. So people who need housing and services together to exit homelessness and to stay in their housing. We will house more than 1,000 households in our permanent supportive housing program between the mix of federal and local resources that are going into those strategies. So a lot of really important investments. There's also $23.5 million to help low-income first-time home buyers with their down payments and closing costs. So and that is just some of the expansion. I'm going to keep going because there's more to tell, and I know that I'm going to run out of time. Gun Violence Building Blocks DC is an initiative that you may have heard city leadership talk about, which is really about bringing a lot of solutions into communities where we are seeing the biggest uptick in gun violence. So there's a set of strategies where people have been very much on the ground in those communities, working directly with people who are either most likely to be involved in gun violence or have been involved in gun violence, to really co-create with them some of the things that they need, as opposed to the government coming in just with a set of interventions. And so these neighborhood action plans are really revealing where are some of the gaps and things that are going to be most important. So we have, in addition to more violence interrupters, in case management, credible messengers, and increase in more police presence where that's needed, there's also a number of measures that will connect people directly where they need to leave a neighborhood and access safe housing somewhere else. More trauma-informed mental health services to really address the trauma that is going on in communities around gun violence, and a set of strategies dealing with the mental health distress, as well as other things happening. So this is some really innovative work around root causes, as well as, I'm not sure if I mentioned some of the connection to jobs and employment services as well, all really important around our strategies for gun violence. Moving on to economic recovery. So there is economic recovery, a whole set of measures for residents and a whole set of measures targeted for businesses. I'm going to hit on some of the highlights for residents. So for residents, we're really excited over at THS because not only are we providing some income supports and some case management and some support to people with connection to workforce opportunities and job search, but we work really closely with all of the workforce development programs. And we know that the most important pathway out of poverty is a job, not just any job, but a career and access to the things one needs to be able to compete in our workforce in the District of Columbia and access those jobs. So some of the things that are exciting there is an increase in subsidized employment and training, increasing in the thousands. There are career coaches coming out of the Workforce Investment Council, a new rapid reskilling fund that will serve people who are out of work and help 700 residents. Upskill is the sort of term of art that people use to talk about, really helping people adapt skills to compete in the economy now. A number of earn and learn seats, as well as an expansion in our Marion Barry Summer Youth Employment, but a range of earn and learn opportunities. There's a targeted workforce training program for LGBTQ plus residents. And there is also some replacement cash assistance for people who can no longer get federal unemployment. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, some technology for people who are receiving TANF or otherwise need help accessing that technology so that they have access to devices to allow them to plug in and be connected from home, as well as some expanded opportunity accounts, which is a matched savings program that will support up to 600 residents every year. There's a program, I don't remember if I glossed over it earlier in the deck or it comes up later, so I'll just tell you about it now because it's one of the things I'm most excited about, and that is a new program called Career Mobility Action Plan, or Career MAP. This is part of our effort to really, again, address the inequities. So you may or may not know that when people receive income support programs, they lose benefits when they start to earn at a rate that does not replace their earnings. So if they start to work, they will often lose their childcare entirely or lose their housing subsidy and not be able to afford to pursue that career. That is one of the structural barriers that exist in programs that keep people from being able to meaningfully access a career. And so we will pilot an initiative that will smooth that and so that families can both pursue an employment path without losing essential resources at a faster rate than they grow their earnings. And we think that will help us demonstrate how we need to adjust, where we can adjust the district's programs, but also it will inform federal policy. And we're partnering with some federal partners as well as we pursue what does it look like to, in this called the benefit cliff, to basically remove the benefit cliff for residents. So we'll pilot an initiative with 300 families in our rapid rehousing program as they pursue a career over 5 years. So we're super excited about what that is. Moving on. So there's a number of areas that are really targeted economic recovery from the angle of how we support our businesses. So some of the things that are in the budget for businesses are around, are listed there, and I will hit some highlights with numbers. So there's $57.7 million for expanding access to grocery stores and sit-down restaurants in Ward 7 and 8 over 3 years. 8.1 million for Great Streets and commercial ownership opportunities for small businesses and to support the Shop in the District campaign and app. $9.2 million over 2 years to create a new technical assistance hub to coordinate capacity building efforts across the district. There's a bridge fund for arts venues, $8 million to support their successful reopening. $30 million to attract high impact employers to the district, increasing employment opportunities for our talented workforce here, and $2 million to more than double investments in resident owned small disadvantaged business enterprises via the Inclusive Innovation Equity Impact Fund. So that's exciting. And there's more detail that you can read about that in the budget. Transportation environment, continuing to expand access to bike share, bike lanes, car-free lanes, and a number of other investments in our environment, as well as transportation, and a new pedestrian bridge that will connect the Berry Farm and Anacostia Metro. Very cool. As a bike commuter, I love all of this. And I think these are some really exciting investments. Also important, access to complete lead and mold abatement for low-income households. Also very exciting. Solar for all installations are more than doubled, and we can keep going. A number of capital improvements, including library modernizations. We've got, we talked about schools, and so a number of those exciting projects, although not all of them are listed here. I'll tell you, in the human services capital budget, we are very excited. There are major investments, more than $100 million, that is going to continue to reimagine and reinvent what our shelters look like. So we saw our all 8 ward strategy for short-term family housing, where we replaced DC General. We opened small community-based programs throughout the district. And with that, as well as a larger system reform, we've seen major reductions in homelessness among families. The environment that people are in when they experience homelessness matters a lot to how they think about their own opportunities, as well as how they trust the services and supports around them. So we will reopen our largest men's shelter on the 801 East campus with a brand new facility in the next fiscal year. We will replace our New York Avenue shelter. We will replace our Harriet Tubman shelter for women, and we'll also replace the lease at our Adams Place shelter with a new building, all really learning from how we create an environment that provides an appropriate temporary space with the right environments and supports embedded, as well as the services that are in those shelters. So with that, I think I'm gonna wrap. So there's a summary, $17.5 billion in our shared recovery and growth. I didn't even name half of the exciting things that are happening there, but really wanted you to have a taste of some of the exciting aspects of the budget. So thank you for that. And Joe put in the chat, thank you, Joe, a link to some of the specific Ward 2 investments that are in the budget. And so you can click on that and see the rack up of those. I will try to answer your questions, and Joe will record your questions that fall outside of my area of expertise, and we will get you answers if you have them, or if you'd like to get on with the remainder of your meeting. I just thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you so very much for this information. I always find it extremely useful and productive to have a representative from the mayor's office come here and from the to really present the budget for us. Commissioners, do you have particular questions that you would like to address at this point?
No. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ellie.
I don't have any specific questions, but thank you for that overview. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell us all about it.
Sorry, that's basically what I was going to say too, is just thank you for coming to our meeting tonight and telling us, what we can expect in the mayor's budget. Thank you.
With this budget, is it a balanced budget once again?
Yes, it is a balanced budget.
That's great. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And are there other questions that folks from our community would like to ask at this time?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Well, I have a few, but the first one is, where can you give us your presentation? Give us the link to it so we could have it and look at it in a little more detail. Some of my questions are, when I saw that DDOT budget, transportation, that's not WMATA. It is separate from WMATA, and it was absolutely huge compared to the others. And I was wondering why, since the federal government gives a lot of money for the federal streets that we have, why is it so huge? What are you expanding on what's been done? And how much of that is going to be down here versus in the neighborhoods? So that was my first question. I'll just give you all my questions so you can decide which ones to answer. Okay, good. Copy the images. I guess I basically covered those are my big questions. The little ones can wait.
Okay, so I'm gonna just ask, since DDOT's budget is human services and I'm not really the expert to really give you all the context, I will ask that we get back to you. I have a list of a number of initiatives. I can't tell you why they're funded with some of the infusion of what's in this budget versus, but what I will just clarify is these are all not district funds. This encapsulates both federal funds that we receive in the district and appropriate, as well as local funds. So don't assume that all of this is local. This would include both federal appropriations that we program as well. So that I can provide as general reference. And then when you get the presentation, you'll see more of an overview, and you could also tune into the DDOT budget oversight hearing and really hear the director talk about what's in the budget, as well as questions that the council poses. And of course, there's even more detail in the budget chapter. So
that's good to know. I did not realize that this included the federal contribution, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of the money that we do get normally is federal. And
yes,
so
especially in this budget with the Recovery Act and funds.
And you're going to give us the URL for how to get a copy.
Yeah, it's already in the chat. And in the first slides, I glossed over those a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't have. It shows what the breakdown is between local general revenue funds and federal funds are in the budget.
I was asking for how we could get what you showed on our own computers.
Yeah, it's there at the link. The link is in the chat if you know how to see the chat.
I'll be happy to send that to you, Joanne.
I'll rely on Michael because I'm very bad at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have time for one additional question, and that will be Howard Marks has his hand up there. But I do encourage folks to write in their questions in the chat box, and Joe and the team will be able to take that back and help answer those questions for us.
Yeah, so Laura, I have a question for you. In those details regarding projects in Ward 2, there was mention of $2 million for quote unquote a sobering center to divert traffic away from emergency rooms. Could you tell us what that's about and where this quote unquote sobering center will be located? Thank you.
Sure. I don't know where it's going to be located, and I don't know that it's going to be located in Ward 2, and Joe may be able to tell you that. I can tell you what it's about. So the district a long time ago had a sobering center, and for some reason it closed. This was way before my time, and it's become a really evident need. So sometimes people who are severely intoxicated, and need to be picked up and safely detox, are taken to emergency rooms to do that, or they're doing that or they're not necessarily safely detoxing on the streets of our city. They oftentimes cannot be dropped off at a homeless shelter and have that be safe. And so they end up really in there's no real safe place for them to be other than an emergency room. And it's not a great use of our emergency beds. So the Department of Behavioral Health has proposed to really take lessons learned from maybe what did and didn't work with the sobering center that closed a number of years ago, and to open a sobering center that will be a place for people who are either because of alcohol or other drugs intoxicated and need a place to go. I don't know if there's a site that has been identified for that, but I know that is an initiative that is contemplated, and I believe that will improve the experience right now, where we really, in a number of ways, sort of see what the lack of existence. Joe, do you know if there is a site planned for that? And was it something that was targeted for Ward 2, or just that would benefit some of the issues that we see in the streets in Ward 2?
I have not heard of a specific site for the sobering center. It's already a note that I'm going to make back to my team to find out more details. And I know that Howard asked this question, but I'm pretty sure the ANC would like to know as well more details. So I will definitely follow up on that.
Yeah, I think I have heard Dr. Bazaran present on the sobering center, and she has never named a location. So I'm not sure that one exists, but I do believe the benefit will be felt throughout, particularly in some areas where there's a lot of nightlife.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, would a sobering center serve as just a short-term type of thing, like one day kind of stay idea?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it really is for a place for people to come and detox, but it also ends up being a really important opportunity to engage people who may be interested in treatment. So first, people have to get sober before they can have that conversation, as a lot of folks may know. And so this provides them a place to safely detox and also be able to get connected to resources if people are interested in treatment.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all so very much for coming this evening and presenting this. I know we have to move on at this point for this evening. I would like to definitely invite both you, Director, and David Ross back to our July meeting, if possible, to further discuss the homeless issues that we're experiencing in Chinatown Penn Quarter, which has tremendously increased during the pandemic and continues to create challenges for everyone involved in the situation. And I'm not even certain that our day center is fully operational with as many individuals that we have on the streets at this point.
Happy to do that. Also happy to connect with you, Commissioner, and others in between, so that even if we're not able to make that meeting again in July, that you have some information that you can share with your constituents about what is happening around that. And the Downtown Day Center is partially open right now for appointments. It will continue to expand. It's as we reopen some of the services that it's offering. But I know you need to get on with the business of today, and happy to make, if not myself, other members of my team available and to share information to make sure you get your questions answered. So thank you for so much of your time today. I hope that you found something that feels exciting to you, and I appreciate the enthusiasm and welcome, and we'll leave you to it. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Oh, not the Downtown Day Center. Okay, sorry. Noted. Thank you.
I would like to move on with our agenda with our Ward 2 Mayor's Liaison, Joe.
Hi, good evening. I will keep my remarks brief. So as we all know, the COVID-19 restrictions have been lifting in phases. The first round of reopenings happened a few weeks ago. The last round will be happening this Friday, June 11th, where nightclubs and large sports entertainment venues can resume normal operations and capacity. Mask mandates will remain up to the residential building or business. I know my residential building has chosen to keep masks on in the public areas, but that won't be up to the businesses or residential buildings. Mask mandates, however, are still required for metro rail and bus, taxis and ride shares, public transportation into, within, or in the area or out of the United States, airplanes, schools and childcare facilities, homeless shelters, correctional facilities, workplaces when required, and healthcare settings. I do want to move on to, I know me and myself and Genevieve with Councilmember Pinto's office have been working with a few folks from the community to address some of the issues surrounding the Pat Handy Legacy site and also that alleyway that has a couple businesses and condo buildings there. Just want to give a brief update, and I kind of want to thank Genevieve for working with me on this and being very helpful as well. So I still want to give her a shout out. Run over a couple things. DHS has said that there are security patrols that are occurring around the shelter, but it's only the immediate area around the shelter. It's not throughout the entire alleyway or the surrounding blocks, but there is an increase in security patrols. DPW, there will be parking enforcement officers to investigate the alley twice daily. And this is for folks who don't know, the alleyway between 5th and 6th, just north of H. So DPW parking enforcement investigate twice daily to reduce the amount of illegal parked cars. There were 7 vehicles that were ticketed on, I believe, yesterday, the 7th. DPW requested the DC Health to investigate presence of rats and continue rat abatement. I spoke with DOH today, and they assured me that rat abatement will continue. There was a notice of violation for one of the properties for scattered trash. There was a request for the alleyway cleaning again, and I made sure that we note that there is not so much bulk trash, but scattered trash throughout the alleyway, and I want to make sure that we're focusing on that. And DPW said that there is cleaning. The issue is that when the trucks go back there and they pick up the dumpsters, there's overflow, and that's what happens. So it's just kind of this continual making sure that we're keeping up on that. And then the Department of General Services, DGS, has put 2 new dumpsters at the rear of the shelter. The older dumpsters had wheels broken. There were issues all around with the dumpsters. So there's brand new dumpsters there. And then DGS is securing a recycling services for the shelter until the end of the occupancy period. So those are my updates that have been going on. I know Genevieve is going to come after me in this. So if I missed anything, I know she'll be able to pick up on it and add. But I do want to hand it back over to Commissioner Schenkel.
Joan, do you have a time frame on when the shelter will close, or Genevieve? I see a head shaking.
My understanding is that construction is supposed to begin in September. So the building would have to be unoccupied in September so that construction can begin.
Right. And I'm just, I know that this is probably not a question for either of you to answer, but it was such an immediate issue to move the residents of the Pat Handy Center to the space on 11th Street that had to occur promptly, and now this space is being used for another shelter. It just doesn't seem like it's in line, or it's really poor planning on the Department of DHS in with this shelter. It doesn't make any sense on why they would be doing this, and continuing to not address the needs of residents. And Joe and Genevieve, I do appreciate you guys very much for stepping up and really helping to get things moving on this alleyway. But I just have to articulate, it is absolutely disheartening that city services and agencies are not coming to the table and addressing this in a more proactive manner. We've been dealing with this for months and months and months, and apparently very little has happened. And somebody needs to be held accountable for this. And I want to figure out with both of you, who is the accountable parties for not moving this forward, and how do we ensure that the mayor's office and the agencies hold people who are not doing their jobs for city residents accountable?
Absolutely. And so, you know, I continue to make sure that this is my focus. And I know, you know, Genevieve and I, you know, we work on this all the time, but I will definitely take that back. And I'm understanding how disheartening this is. So I hear you, Commissioner Schenkel.
Okay. Genevieve, does anybody have any questions for Joe?
I just have one. Since you mentioned about cars parked in an alley, the alley in the block that Ford's Theater is in, the entrance is on F Street between 9th and 10th. I would say on a daily basis, there's an average of anywhere between 6 and 10 cars parked there. They're parked in spaces that are off the main alley or right parallel to the alley. It is a wide alley in the back. It's not a narrow alley. The entrance is just one truck wide, but the alley itself is pretty wide. And they'll park up where Ford's Theater is, behind the office buildings, in nooks and crannies on the opposite side. But there are always cars parked there. So if that alley can be added to, which then makes it difficult to turn around in the alley, is what the problem comes to. But if that can be given some attention, since you mentioned it, I thought I could add that alley to your list.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go ahead and add that to my list for DPW's enforcement.
Michael, doesn't the alley that Mather backs onto have problems too with parked cars?
Yes, we do. But we had not had too much of an issue since most of the restaurants there are currently closed. So,
okay.
I have a couple of questions that came in the chat, and Mike Anderson, are you still on? Oh, there you are. Can you unmute there? There you go.
Yep. Hey, can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm not at a location I can use video. And Joe and Genevieve, I know one of my other board members of my condo building, 809 6th Street Northwest. So we're right on the alley that you talked about. We are directly behind the Legacy Pat Handy site. I appreciate what progress or efforts have done so far, and it is positive that we've gotten some things happening after, frankly, what felt like, you know, what Michael articulated, several months of kind of shouting into the void there about trying to get action. But on a few civic points, what action we've seen so far on specifically the dumpsters. The two new dumpsters They look nice. They got functional wheels. They are insufficient. They don't, for whatever reason, they don't, I don't know how you size the amount of dumpsters you have based on the amount of trash you produce, but they probably hold, those dumpsters probably hold 1/3 to 1/4 of the trash that is generated by the shelter every day, and the shelter personnel are not, frankly, doing enough to kind of evenly distribute the trash between these dumpsters. So you either need to pick those dumpsters up several times a day or expand them. I don't know why the particular current shelter is producing far more trash than any other shelter that has been there previously, but that's just the case. And so that creates trash all over the alley, which then I think creates the expectation of the real issue in the alley is,
Rats.
Yeah, rats are a problem, but people are defecating, urinating like dozens of times in the alley a day. Like, I don't want to, it's horrific. And I'm not, I have I have a unit, my home in that building looks directly out on the alley, and I've owned it for 16 years and lived in all sorts of urban environments. Like, it is worse now than it has ever been, even with the recent kind of changes in whatever measures DHS or DGS has recently put in. So what has happened so far, we appreciate, but is insufficient. The whatever immediate patrols are happening are not sufficient. We've got drug dealing, drug use. We've got dozens of needles dropped in our flower pots in the building, stuff that has never happened on anywhere near this scale before. And this is all very recent. I got other people from my building who are on this, who are on this call and or on this meeting, and they can amplify these comments. But I just, don't stop. You've got several orders of magnitude more of effort that's needed to get back to anything that's livable. It is not safe right now. And you are probably, every day, the neighborhood is probably rolling the dice before there's going to be a violent incident associated with the situation near the shelter or the alley, unless we have a significantly more effort put in. That's, I'll pass that back to you, Michael.
Thank you. I have 3 comments, and this will be, we'll have to move on after this. I have Austin. Hopefully it's the real Austin and not someone else.
It's Emra, actually.
Oh, it's Emra. Okay, I have you on here too, Emra.
Okay.
But you may have, and I have Reginald Black.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, and everyone. And I would like to just emphasize the importance of this problem. I have been living here for almost 2-3 years. Right now, I don't feel safe to walk around. Why? Just check with the police. There is prostitution going on right now. There are people having sex in the park in front of our house. This is not just a trash problem. Every day, we are cleaning the streets here, broken liquor bottles. We cannot take our dog outside anymore since people are trying to kick the dogs. So this needs to be immediately addressed. The police comes, people go just next side of the block. When the police leaves, they come back. So we need a kind of a sustainable solution, and this needs to be heard. And again, my biggest concern is the following. These people are harassing us. These people are harassing women. This needs to be addressed. What are we waiting for? I really appreciate, I know the limitations that you have. There are a bunch of problems in the city, and there's a cost of living in city, but this is a high priority. I mean, what are we waiting for? Do you want some of us to get hurt? Thank you.
And Austin, did Austin want to chime in?
No, thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, just against it. It was a result of a lot of people having my login.
That's okay, no problem. And Mr. Black.
Yes, I wasn't going to say anything, but now I have to. We have to recognize that we do have some issues here in this neighborhood, and I think that more than likely those issues are cultural. We must question as to why, like I said again, in that entire corridor, there's a policy of not having a public restroom. My constituents are literally basically protesting that. And so we want to make sure that we're not locking our way up out of an issue, but really actually looking towards solutions. I can hear those undertones in folks' voice. And I'ma just be a little pointed and a little blunt here. Y'all transplants, when you're talking about homeless people, you're talking about an 86.4% Black population. Recognize that and understand when you're talking about this issue, that is what you're talking about. If you're committed to racial equity, the first thing that needs to be addressed is the fact that there's no public restroom in that entire corridor all the way down to 13th Street. That's what number one. Number two, show up for the city council and demand that those people have more housing vouchers. It's unconscionable we allow the district government only to spend 3% out of a $16 billion budget on housing. That needs to be addressed. There are other things that neighbors can do other than complain about a situation that they haven't taken any proactive actions on themselves in terms of
Mr. Black, I'm gonna stop you there because we are coming to this meeting attempting to find solutions to these problems. And this is an issue that residents who are currently living in that area have brought up repeatedly, asking for assistance in addressing these issues. Social service agencies, DHS, whatever, has not addressed these issues. I appreciate what you're saying, but this is a forum for us to articulate problems and to not scold people for problems. And I will also,
and I apologize because the neighbors have been allowed to do that. And I gave you two solutions. One, address the restroom policy in the corridor. And then two, we are in budget season right now, and you can help initiatives like the Way Home campaign. I gave you two concrete solutions, even though I had some major critiques.
Great.
So please recognize two solutions did come from me.
And absolutely, and I appreciate those solutions. And I will tell you that we have been told repeatedly that the Pat Handy shelter is open for anybody using that shelter. Those restrooms are available 24 hours a day. If you have something that is contrary to that, let me know.
No,
because DHS
right now with COVID modifications, that is the case. The shelter is open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Those men and women who are in that area can access the restroom. I think they are literally acting out because there's no public restroom policy other than the shelter in that corridor.
And I appreciate that. And I don't know of any other block where there is a public restroom available. That is solely a public restroom without using a restaurant. I don't know where that occurs. So
and I would suggest that people, and I would suggest solution number 3, support the Public Restrooms Facilities Act, which actually pilots out 2 standalone 24/7 public restrooms and allocates up to $60,000 for businesses as a further incentive to open their restroom. Consider that act as well.
Absolutely. Genevieve, I'd like to move on to you, please.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Genevieve Hulick. I'm Councilmember Pinto's Chief of Staff, and I have some general updates for you. And again, thank you, Joe, for your partnership in working on a number of the challenges that we've heard from neighbors. I know that we are making progress, albeit it seems slow, but I was glad that Mr. Anderson did acknowledge that he was seeing some improvement. Recently, Councilmember Pinto held outdoor office hours in Farragut Square to give residents a chance to meet with her and our team in person. We will be holding more community office hours in the near future. And if you have suggestions of locations in 2C, we would love to know them and so that we can coordinate some community office hours. as you've probably seen, parking enforcement and street sweeping are back. If you're having trouble getting a DMV appointment, please reach out to our office for assistance. New appointments are released on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. and there were a number of appointments at the 95 M Street Southwest location last time we checked today. If you need to renew your driver's license or ID card, you have until July 1st to get up to date. The Mayor's Ticket Amnesty Program has also started and lasts through September 30th. This is your chance to pay outstanding tickets without having to pay any penalties, and more information can be found at ticketamnesty.dc.gov. I know Joanne mentioned, I'm going to talk about some legislative updates, and I know Joanne mentioned about the noise legislation, so I'll go ahead and answer that question. There's two pieces of legislation that address noise currently. There's the Amplified Noise Amendment Act, which would implement a plainly audible standard and enforcement standards when regulating noise in public space generated from amplifying sound devices. So the big speakers that you hear in your communities would be then regulated on a plainly audible standard. So if it exceeded a certain number of decibels, then there would have to be restrictions on that. And that was introduced by council members Mendelson, Pinto, and Bonds. So your council member Pinto co-introduced that, and it has now been referred to the committee of the whole. So it's great that Chairman Mendelson is also supportive of that. So we're hopeful that will receive a hearing in the fall after the budget season. The other piece of legislation Joanne was mentioning was the Harmonious Living Amendment Act, which would regulate sound for new residential construction. So it would require soundproofing for entertainment venues and soundproofing for any new buildings. And that's introduced by council members Nadeau, Pinto, Henderson, Lewis George, and Allen. And that's been referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development, as well as the Committee of the Whole. So that'll take us until the fall to have some hearings potentially on that legislation because of budget season. I'll talk about budget season in just a moment, but I will mention that there's some small business legislation that Councilmember Pinto is working on, and so keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. As you know, you had your presentation of the budget by Director Zeilinger, and there are some things that are very important to Councilmember Pinto that were included after she advocated for them in her budget advocacy letter. Those items include expansion to school-based mental health clinicians, $13 million for high dosage tutoring, an increase to the number of permanent supportive housing vouchers that Mr. Black talked about, both for individuals and families, an increase in the number of violence interrupters and credible messengers, funding for the K Street Transit Way, and an LGBTQ resource center. Councilmember Pinto will be fighting for additional funding for permanent supportive housing vouchers, acknowledging that a housing first model is the most successful way to move our unhoused neighbors into permanent housing. She'll also be fighting for additional funding for clean teams for our business improvement districts. So I know there was a comment in the chat about making sure that there's additional resources to keep our communities clean. So that's something that is very important to Councilmember Pinto. She's also working to get additional funding for small businesses, expand the Great Street programs throughout Ward 2, and seek out funding for a new Shaw Middle School, among other budget priorities. And the council is holding budget oversight hearings, and we encourage everyone to testify or send in testimony. And I put a link in the chat for Councilmember Pinto's website where you can see the budget oversight dates and participation instructions. So we encourage you to do that. As a reminder, Councilmember Pinto serves on the Committee on Business and Economic Development, Housing and Executive Administration, Judiciary and Public Safety, and Government Operations and Facilities. And so those are the committees she'll be marking up parts of the budget, but she is certainly interested in a number of different areas. So please reach out to our office with your priorities as well. So I think that's my full update from Councilmember Pinto's office.
Thank you, Genevieve. I again appreciate your input, and I believe if I read the first piece of legislation that you talked about on sound, that was not applicable to zones that were zoned commercial. It was only for residential areas, which would not help any of the challenges that we're experiencing in 2C at this point. That if it's commercially zoned, which all of our units are, our area is commercially zoned, residents are not recognized in that area, that becomes a challenge. And I believe that I read that was restricted to residential zoned locations in the city.
I don't believe that it's only restricted. I'll have to double check that. I think it changes the standard throughout based on whether or not you're using an amplified sound device.
Got it.
So I think that there's an additional part of the legislation that changes the definition in residential districts, but I do believe that the limitations on sound are based on the use of an amplified device, regardless of where it would be. But I'll double check that.
Yeah, that would be helpful to know.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. I have been in conversations with the BID. I know they are trying to do some creative programming in the area to invite musicians to play at more regulated sound levels, so that there is an opportunity for the arts in your community, but at a more regulated sound. So I know that is something that the downtown BID is working on, and that our office is happy to collaborate on.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
And Thomas, did your hand go down by yourself, or did I accidentally do that?
Oh no, my hand went down, but I've been going back and forth between wanting to ask a question or not.
Okay, gotcha. I wasn't sure if I hit the button that said your hand down by accident or not. Are there any other questions for Genevieve? And I have Reginald Black and I have Joanne Newhouse.
Yes, my question is about the legislation that approves go-go as the official music. And I'd like to know, is the council member considering how to look at performance-based economics in terms of her role on the Business and Economic Development Committee? Because if we do start to begin to restrict the noise level for those buskers who have a amplified sound apparatus, we are going to affect a significant portion of gig workers' income. And I want to be cognizant of, we have laws on the books that give us avenues and opportunities to support performance-based economics in a more effective way than just criminalizing people. Again, overwhelmingly, the majority of those musicians are Black. Other than criminalizing them and enforcing them, we should be providing space for them to have venues. We should be helping them to secure venues and have some sort of a normalization and a stabilization of how they're able to earn income. Those buskers come there to that corridor because there is a lot of traffic just all day and night, and they're able to earn substantial income, which pays for their food, which pays for their housing, which pays for their health care, and it also pays for, whatever childcare, whatever services they're accessing. city who are running buses from here to New York. And since there's such a transient population of people that are moving in and through there, I think we should also take a look at how do we support them rather than just sticking to some rigid enforcement on that. Yeah. And I'd like to hear what are some ideas from the council member on how to support them in terms of economic development.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Black. And certainly the arts and music is important to our communities. And the legislation is not meant to prevent people from performing. It's meant to ensure that the noise levels at which the performances are done are at a level that allows the community to enjoy their community as well. And so I would just want to make that clarification that it's certainly not that Councilmember Pinto is opposed to the buskers or to performers or music or go-go music at all. It's more so noise level regulation. And certainly making sure that DC is the best place to start and maintain a business is paramount for Councilmember Pinto. There's legislation that will be revealed soon that will address some of the challenges that people might face. And so if there's ideas or ways that our office can be supportive of people becoming, entrepreneurs in the District of Columbia, then that's something that we certainly want to look at and see if we can be supportive of. So,
one quick additional question. Could you describe some of the council members' conversations on this bill with both the Commission on Nightlife and Culture and the Office on Nightlife and Culture? So I know they would have had to been a part of this conversation.
Mr. Black, I don't have any specifics to share on whether or not those conversations happened or not, or what might have been included. But I know that what is very important to Councilmember Pinto is that there's input from community members on any piece of legislation or anything that moves forward, whether it's from the agency perspective or from the council perspective, and making sure there's input from the community. So I would hope that we would hear from you and from the ANCs and from neighbors about anything that we're doing, and we welcome those conversations from all stakeholders.
Joanne?
Yeah, hi. I was actually going to ask about, you didn't mention of all the different things that the councilman was interested in. What got left out was arts and culture. And I just want to make sure that since we do have a lot of cultural facilities down here that help the city economically and bring joy to a lot of people, that is not left out, and that there be attention given to it. Of all the different professions, probably those in the performing arts had the worst impact from the pandemic, with theaters closing very early on and no performances taking place. And what was done like you're going to see a film on your computer or your TV screen. So I just think that when they start looking at the budget and how it gets distributed, that attention really be given, a lot of attention be given to the arts, because we want them to come back here strongly and not weakly. It's important to the neighborhood. A lot of people have moved here because of that.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Joanne. And that's certainly a concern of Councilmember Pinto's, making sure that we can bring folks back downtown to enjoy the multitude of amenities, and also making sure that businesses that are here can get relief that they need, whether it's through the revitalization fund or finding funds in the budget for commercial rent relief, and finding creative ways to support those businesses to encourage a robust.
Can I meet with you at some time in the future to give you a call and set up a meeting to learn about?
Absolutely. My email, I put my email in the chat, but perhaps Commissioner Schenkel can share it directly with you.
Yes. Howard, Mark, you had your hand up.
I did, and I just wanted to, Genevieve, I wanted to commend Council Member Pinto once again for showing leadership on the noise issue. For those of us that live in Chinatown Penn Quarter, we're faced with this music. It's not even music. It's really digressed now into large amplifiers playing recorded music at ear-splitting levels that have driven out actually the good musicians, the ones that Mr. Black referred to. They've left this area. They cannot do any business here because what's happened is that people who are coming in here who are not musicians at all are creating just havoc. People can't sleep here in this on our building, our condo building, have difficulty at night. People who are handicapped can't. Was a young woman, a girl, could not do her homework because of the noise coming up from the street. I myself suffer from tinnitus, and that condition is worsened by this noise. And the Turn Down Coalition does not want to put these people out of business. We want to work with them. We want to work with your office. And I just wanted again to thank Councilman Pinto for her leadership. Thank you.
And the final comment that we'll take is from Thomas Lee.
Hi, Genevieve. My name's Thomas. I live at 7th and D Street. And I do want the Councilor Pinto to be aware of a particular individual. The gentleman's homeless. I think I was told he's on drugs. He does smelling salts. Every morning he creates a huge amount of trash and litter. There's always a big pile of trash on 7th Street right in front of him. And he also yells and screams, and he pushes trash cans onto their sides, like all over the neighborhood. And the 7th Street, as you know, is the major, almost commercial thoroughfare for many tourists that come from the National Mall up and patronize businesses on 7th Street in Penn Quarter and Chinatown. And they have to pass by this individual who yells and shouts and panhandles aggressively and spits. And it's just like this person just puts himself in front of the Claire Barton Museum. Is there anything that we can do as a community to help this individual get the help he needs?
Absolutely. Mr. Lee, I put my email in the chat. If you could email me directly, that would be great, because we can reach out to Pathways for Housing, which is charged with community outreach to those experiencing homelessness in the Chinatown area. So I will directly work with them to get some outreach to this individual and see what kind of resources we can get them. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
But that's voluntary, correct? I mean, if he doesn't want to go with them, he doesn't have to. Is that correct? I mean, I'm not familiar with this.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Unless Captain Duro can probably talk a little bit more about this, but if he's not committing a crime, then Pathways for Housing would be able to do anything. But building relationships is really critical, and the more relationships that Pathways can build with folks, the more they will be willing to receive services that can then lead them into housing and into supportive environments and not in the situation that they're in right now. Okay. So we're committed to working with Pathways on that.
Thomas, hi. I thought you told me that he had agreed to go for services. Was that not the case?
No, he was taken away after one particularly violent event. He'd been taken away for a few days, and then he's returned now. And then yesterday morning, many of the trash bins in the neighborhood were on their sides, basically to push them over.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Genevieve, and we do appreciate the update from the council member's office. I'd like to move on to MPD 1, if we could. Captain Duro.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Commissioners, good evening. I guess I'll start with a brief overview and then just address some of the things that have come up during your conversation so far. Violent crime, we had a pretty good month again. We only had one violent crime. That was a robbery. It happened about 2 a.m. It was actually the bus stop that I see is on the agenda on the 600 block of H Street. It was narcotics related. where four subjects robbed another, jumped him basically and robbed him. They were all placed under arrest, all four of them. They are people that are known to us from the neighborhood. And like I said, the whole thing was narcotics related. So that was the only violent crime. Property crime, unfortunately, we've seen a huge uptick. And, you know, we're coming up against the period last year, and I've been discussing this for months now, where last year we were obviously shut down. You know, our theft reports, which is the bulk of our reports that we take in the Chinatown area, theft from autos and theft from businesses and kind of petty thefts, they kind of ground to a halt last year during this time. So they've made a pretty strong comeback. And I did look at our 2019 and 18 numbers though, and we are about the same level or even a little below those numbers. So, you know, that's a bit encouraging that we're at least not higher than we were pre-pandemic, but it is something we're keeping an eye on. Obviously, you know, violent crime is a huge priority for the city, for the chief right now. So that's where a lot of our efforts are focused. So just be aware of that. We are still struggling with the stolen autos, the delivery drivers and people picking up, dropping off, leaving their cars running. We've done a ton of work on that in the last year all over the city, really. You know, that kind of started just north of Chinatown and Mount Vernon Triangle. We are still getting some cases in Chinatown, just south of Chinatown on like 6th and 7th Street. We've had a few instances. We're doing outreach. We're passing out flyers. We're doing enforcement, writing tickets. We're still at it. We're doing what we can. It's just people can't not leave their cars running for some reason. We do what we can. So whatever you can do to get the word out, we'd appreciate it, because a lot of these cars have been used in other crimes. And yeah, again, prevention, you know, is worth a lot. So that is kind of a very broad overview. Do you want me to go ahead and jump into maybe the 5th Street shelter? Sure. Just wanted a few comments on that. And I guess, actually, let me back up. You know, we had the unit in Chinatown doing the narcotics work, and I think they were very successful, and they're still there. We've seen that some activity has shifted over to 5th Street and also up 7th Street. So they've been doing more work there. But again, our focus is really on arresting the dealers. And honestly, we've arrested most of them at this point. They're known to us. They've been arrested in Chinatown with guns, with drugs. And those cases, for the most part, have not gone forward. So what we're really trying to do is focus on the next higher level up in the chain of distribution, basically. So they have, that's a little less visible work, but that has been ongoing. With the shelter in general, last I heard from the community, the feedback I've received is that we had a good presence there. You know, we had an increased presence and things were better. So I'm disappointed to hear, you know, the increased ongoing concern about that area. I will say we'll refocus our efforts a little bit there. Again, our focus is going to be on violent crime and the narcotics. The quality of life stuff we will address if we see it. We're not going to be, you know, our goal is not to arrest a whole bunch of people for panhandling and urinating in public. That's I honestly, I don't think that's a long-term solution to anything. So I was out walking the other day to a meeting. I had a woman urinate right in front of me on the sidewalk right there in the downtown area. So, you know, I feel you. We need some solutions. I agree, but I don't think again, throwing handcuffs on a bunch of people is the solution to that. So, other than that, someone mentioned prostitution. That's the first time I had heard that. Look, I guess in general, what I would like to say is my email is in the agenda. I think you all have it. If things like this are creeping up, please email me so I can, you know, I'm not always, you know, I don't work 24 hours a day, unfortunately. I'm not always aware of kind of what's going on every minute of the day out there. So if you do see stuff like that in the community, please email me and I can assign resources and, you know, get the right resources to address some of those issues. Obviously, if prostitution is happening like that, that is a concern for us and we would like to work on that. The guy yelling on 7th Street, moving on to that, I'm sure, I think it was Thomas Lee. I'm sure he is known to us. I'm sure he is known to Pathways. I'm sure we're very familiar with him. I'm sure we have transported him multiple times to get mental assessments. So the way it works is if someone is a danger to themselves or others, if they're deemed by a police officer due to mental health issues to be a danger to themselves or others, and it's a high standard. It's not so high that we don't utilize it on a just about daily basis. And it sounds like I'm sure we have utilized it with this gentleman, but again, they are taken for mental assessment. They're held for, I believe it's up to 3 days, and then they're released. And again, all treatment after that is voluntary. So unless they're committing really serious crimes, that's what the procedure is. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think I hit everything, but yeah.
Really great question when you mentioned about the narcotics dealing. Is they're not moving forward because of the U.S. attorney?
Correct. It's a combination of issues. It's the U.S. attorneys, and I think they have very legitimate resource concerns as well on their end of cases that they think will be successful, right? They have a duty to use their resources, in an efficient and responsible manner as well. Some of them are, for example, they passed the new consent law, so we've run up against that, where we have very experienced narcotics officers who are doing things that they think are okay, but that the U.S. attorneys feel might be deemed in violation of the new consent law. That was one thing we ran up against. Some of it is just burden of proof type issues, where we feel like we have definitely met probable cause and could easily meet beyond reasonable doubt. But, the U.S. attorneys, based on what they know about the judicial system here in D.C., don't feel like they could prove those cases. So that's everything from stop and seizure issues to, and we've been working with them. I was going to have a conversation, but then Doug Klein got injured and went out. So I need to circle back around and arrange that. But I think we were fairly successful, regardless of that, and at least cleaning up that corner of 7th and H. It's just, we would like to see some consequences, I guess, if you're found with, a bunch of drugs and a gun in your pants. They're back out the next day, and it's frustrating for us, but that's where we're at.
Great. I have 2 hands up. I have Austin and then Father DeRosa. Austin?
Hi, just a quick note for Captain Duro. Understand the burden of proof issue makes a lot of sense, and definitely appreciate the priority of the narcotics issue. I just want to make you aware that, given things have gotten so bad, there is kind of grassroots community effort right now to collect evidence. So I have videos of people openly selling drugs, persons who have been selling narcotics, particularly bagged narcotic, not marijuana, but the harder stuff. So that exists. It's constantly compiled. There are persons who are known to us, probably known to you as well. So just so that you're aware, we got lots of videos of things, cash and drugs exchanging hands right in front of the building, and obviously we're right behind the Pat Handy Center as well.
Yeah, look, if you can send anything you can send me like that, we will use, and we will use it to identify folks and in our investigations. We're not able to go arrest somebody because they were on video, selling, because we have to have the evidence, right, of what it actually was. We observe that stuff on video as well. Gallery Place, for example, has great video, and we've observed them in the act and recorded that and taken that to court. And unless you can actually see, that's a $5 bill, and that's that's a piece of crack cocaine, which most of the time, even with very good video systems, you're not going to be able to get that level of detail. We have not been successful, let me say that. But that being said, we do want that information, and we will use it in our investigations if you can forward it to me. That'd be great.
Father DeRosa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Father DeRosa from St. Mary's in Chinatown. I have 2 questions related to Captain Duro's presentation. One is if there's any way that we can write to or communicate with the U.S. Attorney to explain that among the other problems related to this drug dealing is the fact that these drug dealers are preying precisely on the homeless, and that is an unconscionable thing for us to permit when we have a homeless shelter on in our neighborhood, right? That they should not be allowed to prey precisely on the weakest among us. But the other question, which is related, but not a specifically MPD issue, is I think everybody can agree that getting businesses open and getting foot traffic moving on the street again is going to be one of the best ways to keep our intersections and everything safe and prosperous for everybody, and thus to generate the tax dollars needed for all of our social programs and so on. And we have a new business that's trying to open up across the street from us, where the proprietor has been had racial slurs yelled at him for trying to open up his store. I've been in the store; it's a perfectly respectable place. They're getting ready to open, and I've talked to, among other, it's not always the homeless. Sometimes it's the residents of Judiciary House, who, according to their own housing director, Mr. Poles, tells me that, look, some of these people are mentally ill, or some of them just are, in a real hard place, and everybody understands that. I'd love to see if we can get more of these people from like Pathways to Housing or equivalent organizations to do one-on-one encounters with these people on the street on a much more regular basis until that business starts thriving again, getting a lot of foot traffic, so that the intersection, it's a non-MPD solution to have the intersection observed, have help offered to people, and so on. Because the thing is that when not only his business, but now the burger joint on the other side of 5th and H, when it opens, and that's a corporate venture, that's not a private business, those people are going to be a lot less benign in their attempts to deal with all of this than we, the neighbors in the neighborhood, are. So I'd love to see a non-MPD, although Captain Duro, I love our police department, but a non-MPD solution to get some of these issues resolved. So if there's any way we can up that presence, that sort of benign presence from social service agencies doing one-on-one encounters with people until foot traffic picks up again to naturally kind of suppress issues, I think that'd be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. I'm sorry, Howard and Thomas, I'm not sure who put their hand up first, so I'll just go with Howard because you're first on my screen.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to salute Captain Duro for the work this Special Narcotics Squad has done along 7th and H over the last 4 months. It's amazing how much better our quality of life is here at the Residency Gallery Place. People were reluctant to walk their dogs late at night because of the presence of these drug dealers. And they've gone elsewhere. I don't know where they've gone to, but it's just amazing what police presence has done to increase the quality of life and our sense of security and safety. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you. Like I said, I think some of that activity has moved over to 5th Street. Some of it's moved a little north on 7th. I'll say we had a lot of resources there, that we don't necessarily have in these other spots, like good camera systems, Metro Transit Police, et cetera, community partners. So, but we will be working on those other spots as well. But thank you.
The one thing, I'm not sure, I believe Thomas brought this, someone brought this up earlier about the prostitution in the area. I have noticed, this is for Lieutenant Hamlin as well, on G Street between 9th and 10th, there are actual, what I presume as flyers for prostitute sex workers in that area that are hung on a couple of poles that people have pulled down and brought over. So I initially thought it was a joke that was going up, but they keep coming back. So just putting that out there. I'm not sure what it's like on 6th and 5th and in the park there, but I have noticed that on G Street as well.
Yeah, that's the first time I'm hearing about that. So
yeah,
we'll take it under advisement and keep an eye on that for sure.
Thank you, Captain Duro. Can we move on to Lieutenant Hamlin?
Hey everybody, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So again, I'm not going to harp on everything Captain Duro talked about. I will quickly mention that the crime in 209's similar to the crime in 1D, where the majority of our crimes are property crimes. We haven't had any serious violent felonies, no homicides within the last 30 days. And it is up from last year slightly, but compared to the year before, it's about equal. But crime has been down over the last 12 months or so due to COVID, as Captain Duro mentioned. So just to address some of the homeless issues, one of the things I've been doing in 209 on the 26th of last month, I had a homeless outreach event in PSA 209 at 13th and H, the park right there next to the downtown Bid Homeless Outreach Center. And I worked in conjunction with them. Ms. Bird was there along with Mr. Price, who I have a meeting with tomorrow. But I am planning another outreach event in fall in PSA 209. Because I feel like we do forget about the homeless people a lot in the city. And I do want everybody to remember that we do have to address crime, but homeless in and of itself is not a crime. So we need to help those people the best we can. With that being said, I didn't know about the prostitution issues going on G Street between 9th and 10th. Does anyone know, has anyone seen the actual prostitution or what they suspect to be prostitution, or have they just seen the flyers?
I've just saw the flyers, but Austin has his hands thumb up.
Yeah, perhaps not the best gesture, but yeah, I mean, this has been something that I look right over this alleyway. So it's usually, not full sex, but a lot of sex acts. So it's not.
And where is that occurring?
So right behind, what is the acupuncture address that's adjacent to us? I think it's 805 or 807.
It's on Fifth Street, right?
Yeah, no, on 6th Street is the facade. But I mean, that's the favorite area to urinate, defecate, and give head. So.
Okay. And what time of the day is this stuff occurring?
This is pretty common. I mean, we currently have 5 needles in our garden, hypodermic or whatever they're called. This stuff is just frequent all times of day.
Okay.
Can you say where again on 6th Street is? Because I couldn't hear you.
I believe the address is 807.
It's between H and I.
Thank you.
Thank you, but I have not seen the actual sex work happening on G Street, but I have seen the flyers, and next time I see one, I'll snap a picture.
Yeah, that'd be great. I am going to have, I will be in tomorrow. I will definitely have some units going down there to kind of look around, see if they can find these flyers.
I thought it was, I really thought it was a joke to start with.
I'm thinking the flyers may give a location or some kind of contact information. So that's, and that's something we can definitely forward to, our prostitution unit to have them look into it. And the biggest thing there, what they're really looking for is like the human trafficking aspect of it. So that's definitely something that I will pass along and have our units give a special attention to, especially during, the darker hours, because that's definitely something we want to address. But
got it.
Yeah. So if anybody else has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Both
thank you
very much. I appreciate both of you here. Oh, Thomas, you have a.
Yeah. Quick question. Why not use? You mentioned that you couldn't get evidence. Why not use sting operations? I mean, if someone is selling drugs on the street and you can't, you have video, but you have no proof that they're selling drugs, why not just, buy drugs from them, and then just use that as evidence?
Yeah, no, and that we do that as an agency. However, that's a fairly specialized skill. To have undercover officers in plain clothes go out buy drugs. There's specific, operational planning that has to be done for that. So that is something that's done out of our narcotics and special investigations division. And they have hit Chinatown in the past numerous times. That's not something that we do at the district level. So that's not something the first district or the second district would do, is to have plainclothes officers going out and doing buys. We do use CIs, which is confidential informants, to go out and buy drugs. And sometimes at the district level, we'll even have officers in plainclothes doing observation points and observing. And that is how we have made some of the arrests I was talking about. Specifically, I was referring to videos of past events, that someone might give us, that happened a few days ago. That is something we would not be able to use in and of itself to make an arrest on. We could use that as evidence to gather more, information, more evidence, and to build a case. And that's why I was asking to send that to me so we can use that. But just because you send me a video from last week of someone that's, doing what appears to be a hand-to-hand, I can't then go out and just arrest that guy or even get a warrant for him just based on that.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you both for your update tonight. And we appreciate that very much.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. We would like to move on to our next agenda item and talk about the current bus shelter, which is on the 600 block, of H Street Northwest. And this is located on the south side of the street. I did put together a little presentation here about some of the challenges that have been brought forward, and what I'm really trying to do, and what we're really trying to do tonight, is to determine what recommendations community would have regarding this current shelter. So again, this shelter is located right kind of immediately to the east of the Metro access to Metro Center. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, I'm kind of highlighting the bus area here. What has been reported, and this has come through a variety of sources, including the Downtown Bed. I did invite Galen Brooks tonight here to also talk about this. This is just probably a terrible picture of the bus itself, area itself. As you're coming down the sidewalk, this structure sits here, and the sidewalk also narrows due to the facade of the buildings. And you can see where the gentleman is standing at in the distance there. That is actually the start of will be the start of a new building that will be built on that property. What has been noted by area residents is that there's a tremendous amount of congregation of non-bus riders at this particular stop. There is pedestrian safety issues as people walk through this area, and you'll see in another picture some other issues, which I'm sure Howard Marks is going to want to use in a presentation soon. And there's also been noted criminal activity at the spot. Captain Duro just mentioned about a narcotics theft that occurred there at the stop. In fact, when I was hanging signs at this bus stop about us talking about this, I was approached and asked if I needed anything in particular at the site. This is an example of the current shelter. We have an ad sign on if you're facing the shelter on the left-hand side, a clear back glass, a bench, and a small half wall that is also glass on the right-hand side of the shelter. It is my understanding that Metro currently has 2 shelter designs, this design in place, and a design in which the back of the shelter is completely covered in ads, in ads at the location, and others can chime in if they have other information. This was kind of the scene of the sidewalk in which I came when I hung signs at. As you can see, there's a lot of congestion. Several buses came and went from this location while I was here. And this crowd, the majority of this crowd stayed there during that particular time. And I just wanted to kind of get your inputs as community members on what, if anything, we should be doing with the bus stop area at this point. If you notice behind the bus shelter, this is currently in exit doors from Gallery Place that would kind of come out onto the street there. Some of the proposed recommendations were related to moving this bus stop completely to another location, which does not seem feasible or likely because Metro Center is a major cross transportation point to the city. And secondly, another recommendation is to request that this shelter be removed completely from the street. Currently, right before this structure, you can see this is where the kind of where my cursor is on the upper picture here is the entrance to the entrance to the actual metro, where you go down the escalators to access the metro. That people typically stand in this area in inclement weather and walk down to the stop as the bus approaches across H Street. Galen, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. So good evening, everyone. I'm Galen Brooks. I'm with the Downtown DC.
Can't hear.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, even better. Move forward more.
Oh no, that's scary.
That's better.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. As I was saying, I'm Galen Brooks with the Downtown DC Business Improvement District. And Commissioner Schenkel, I think you really covered the points very well. We've heard a lot, and I was invited here this evening just to share a little bit about what we've heard in regards to this bus stop and the issues surrounding it. They very much kind of align with what Commissioner Schenkel was sharing, but we've heard from residents, business owners, property owners in the immediate area that this node has become a real concern, right? As was mentioned, Captain Duro shared the recent robbery that occurred, but there's been a lot of criminal activity at the site for a while now. And the congestion there is clearly somewhat due to the shelter. And some of the we've heard comments about people being resistant and feeling that the space feels forbidding because of the tightness of the shelter against the wall of the building adjacent to it. So just really interested to hear what the ANC thinks about this, but did want to share particularly those comments that we've heard a lot from residents, business owners, property owners in the area about this site being a real concern. Partially, it seems, because of the condition created by the shelter that's there and the sightline issues that arise and sort of the feeling of having a safe space to conduct illicit activity at this location. And so just wanted to make sure to share that and convey and hear what you all think about the issue.
And I have Josh raising your hand there.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Josh Turnbull. I'm the general manager with Oxford Properties. We're the property owner of Gallery Place, at least the commercial element of Gallery Place, and actually the adjacent property lot that Commissioner Schenkel was describing, where the kind of black fenced wall is right now, which is a separate lot, but we are the owners of that area as well. Yeah, I echo kind of everything you guys said as to what the concerns are. I sort of see it as two different points. One is just the overall congestion, traffic flow impediment that people experienced walking, up and down H Street, particularly in the area of that bus shelter. It gets very narrow between the 6th Street side of that shelter and where the facade of the building comes out, and the quantity of people that are either waiting for the bus or are just sort of hanging around and using that bus location as a hangout point and not getting on the bus at all. And then the criminal and other activity that we've seen there. Captain Duro described the one event a few weeks ago. I've been at Gallery Place for 11 years. In the last few years, I'm aware of 2 different shootings. I had to replace the doors that were shown behind that bus stop because of the bullet holes in the doors a couple of years ago. We had several other, what I would describe as the most violent assaults I've seen in my time at Gallery Place have all been featured right around that bus shelter. Some of them are several years back, but they've all been where that shelter has been used as a kind of a hiding spot of some sorts to jump somebody coming around it. Several of them have been narcotics related. Some of them were not narcotics related. We have a security camera immediately above that on our facade, sort of off the back of the AT&T store there. We see quite detailed, and it's a pan tilt zoom camera that zooms in and gets quite a bit of detail. A lot of the narcotics arrests Captain Duro was referencing with the recent unit in Chinatown have certainly come from that camera, or from assistance with footage from that camera. And it's just been very obvious to us that there's a problem here that needs to be addressed. We also, I would say that the shelter itself, because of how much space it takes up and because of what it provides from those hiding points, is really kind of the biggest piece of the issue. We do have adjacent space there as you head into the metro where, if it's inclement weather, if it's raining, people duck under that area anyways to sort of stay out of the weather, even when it's really hot or really cold. They may just stand under there to avoid the weather and still see their bus coming. So the people that really are using it are kind of using that area anyways, as opposed to using the shelter. So, there is sort of an alternative there for the people that really do need a shelter. I can just say for many years now, our office tenants whose entrance is further down H Street have basically just described that as the gauntlet as they're walking through there. And it's all throughout the day, obviously in a pre-pandemic world, and hopefully what we see here back soon. Morning, from mid-morning through evening, constant crowding. Lunchtime is very difficult to walk through there to go, pick up lunch or whatever you're doing, walking down the street. I know that our neighboring commercial building on 6th Street has at one point provided escorts in the evening with their security officers to the metro because their tenants felt unsafe walking through that area. And I know that generally they've just found it to be a real problem as well. So, it's an issue. The one other comment I was going to make is that black fence, which has a leasing sign right now, and it had been painted black and is sort of wearing. we do have plans to, well, there's no immediate plans to build a building there, but that will come one day. There is plans to kind of beautify that area and put a mural. You know, we worked with a number of muralists last year on our building, and we're continuing to work with them and providing some other space for them to do some work. And that fence is likely to see something fresh and clean and inviting very soon. So I just figured I'd throw that out there while we're talking about the area. But really, anything that could be done to move that shelter or adjust it or decrease the footprint of it would be much appreciated, at least on our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. I have Howard Marks.
I just wanted to echo what Josh said. I'm on the board of the residents at Gallery Place. I would recommend, from what I heard this evening, that the ANC should send a letter to WMATA, to Metro, asking that the shelter be removed. As Josh just said, the purpose of the shelter, of course, is to keep passengers free of rain and snow and so on, wind. It's not necessary, because just a few feet away is the covered entrance to, which is in our building and Josh's building too, to the Metro. So people could just go in there and wait for the buses in there. It's actually much safer. It provides a better environment in there than this tiny little shelter with these really uncomfortable looking seats. They look awful. Like, really, who would want to sit there? I think that would be the immediate solution or tact, is for the ANC to send a letter to WMATA asking that bus shelter be removed and give the reasons for it. That's number one. Number two, there is a study underway right now by, I believe by DDOT, to put in bus lanes on H from 14th all the way to North Capitol Street. This would be a good subject as to whether the routing of this H Street / Benning Road buses should be changed. I mean, why do these buses coming from east of the Anacostia River and from the H Street, East H Street area, why do they have to stop at Gallery Place? Why can't they turn around, for example, at the stop Noma Gallaudet stop on M Street, M and First? That would make a lot more sense, actually. And the riders would be able to get a better commute and spend less time than having to make their way through all the way to 7th and H, or maybe even Judiciary Square stop. There's like no traffic there. Passengers could be left off and picked up exactly on G Street there, or F Street. That would be perfect. So, but I mean, the first course would be to send the letter to WMATA. Let's get rid of that shelter, and then let's sit down and talk about a long-range plan for those H Street Benning Road buses. Thank you.
Michael?
Yes, Joanne.
In response to that, I just have a gut reaction. I've done transportation planning before. I don't think that you can just go throw the buses on another street. And I don't necessarily think that F is a better street for them, or G. But it would take a lot of study. It's not something that would be done quickly. I would never recommend it be done just like that. It's more, it takes a little bit more study, a lot more study than just throwing it out. Moving the buses to another street.
Commissioners, do you have any thoughts, concerns?
I would just agree with Joanne that anything that happens there, it needs to be studied. extensively and, with the right stakeholders before anything is, taken away or rearranged or whatever. So I agree that's an area that could definitely be studied, and hopefully, WMATA is planning, if they're not already, that they're planning to do that soon.
Yeah, I agree. I think our role is to present this information about the problem and not to propose a solution that I don't have necessarily any background in, if that would be the best solution. So yeah, I agree. I think just identifying the issues of the area is what I feel comfortable is our role, and I'm happy for us to write a letter making that a little more clear, something along those lines. And the three of us could talk about that, more. We're not going to be able to accomplish that right in this moment, but I think that's more, in line with what our expertise would be.
I would add to that if the ANC thinks that a quicker study could be done just about removing the shelter without addressing the traffic on the bus traffic, that might be something that could be done possibly with a lot less time, if that's something that you wanted to consider. I'm not saying that you should, it's just, it's one piece, but that doesn't involve the traffic.
Moving lines, right.
I think removing the actual, if we're talking about the physical structure only, with the idea of people, if they want to be, shaded, could just move farther away. I don't think that's going to address any underlying problems.
I don't think it would address the underlying problem. It would just give more space for people to get through the intersection, the sidewalk, because everyone said it's too congested, and that would provide a little more space for movement. It wouldn't solve the underlying problem. I mean, these underlying problems have much deeper roots to them than a shelter or bus traffic.
I would also be curious if Ms. Brooks, if you had any comments on that, considering your expertise.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a really helpful conversation.
Can't hear you.
To be hearing. Are you all having trouble hearing me?
No.
Okay. I did want to share the group. So the Department of Transportation is the group for bus stop for planning for this. So they'll be the recipient of the letter to request further analysis. And I think that's a good idea. Interestingly, when looking at the site, if you look on the 7th Street side, right, at 7th and H, the bus stop there is equally, if not more, well-traveled than the bus stop on the H Street side, right, on the 600 block, and there's no shelter. And that must have been intentional, right, because the sidewalks there on both sides are quite narrow for the capacity that they have to carry. You have 22,000 riders on average pre-pandemic going through Gallery Place, right? And then you have bus lines that are some of the most popular in the region, right? So it's a lot of foot traffic. And because of the slightly lower prominence of H Street at that location, I think it was given a bus shelter, but not necessarily with a great deal of care, looking at the surrounding environment and the demands for the streetscape because of the intensity of the pedestrian congestion that's there. So I think, asking DDOT for further study and analysis and attention to this site would be worthwhile. I would also wonder if perhaps, probably a lot to ask, but perhaps a group of us could do a site walk together. I think that could be really helpful too. When you're out there, and I'm sure you've all been out there, but when you're out there and thinking about it, you do feel the tightness of the space behind the shelter, and it does feel unsafe, right? Like, we all are city people. We know what feels safe. We know what feels good. We know where we try and stick to when we're out in public space to keep ourselves safe, right? And you walk behind that shelter and it does not feel smart, right? Like that does not feel like a terribly smart passageway to go through in comparison to a lot of the other surroundings, which feel like a better choice, right? And thankfully it's in a setting where there are better choices. So I do think that going out there as a group could be really helpful too.
I would like to, at this point, well, I think there are two things. I think going out as a group at some point is an excellent idea to see the space and the congestion and hear what we're talking about. I think that if WMATA had other shelter prototypes, I think it would be wise to use something other than that large structure at that particular location. So I would like to make a motion that I'd like to move that we send a letter to DDOT at this point to explore remedies for safety, pedestrian safety, and congestion with that bus shelter on the 600 block of H Street.
Seconded. This is a formal motion. Yeah, seconded.
Yes. Okay. All those in favor? Okay. So I'll draft that letter with and share it with the commissioners before I send it to DDOT. And I would also recommend that we probably schedule a time outside of this to go back and kind of look at that as a group with Galen and Josh and others who may want to join us at that visit. Okay.
That sounds good, Michael. Yep. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that. It's an important issue to bring up.
Thank you.
We'd like to move on to Abra licensing, and do we have Matt on? Hi, Matt.
How are you doing?
And this will be for, is it Puro Gusto?
Puro Gusto, yes.
Puro Gusto, okay, got it.
Also, Frank Smith is on the call as well. He's the vice president of the licensee. So this is going to be an application for a retailer's Class C restaurant license for Puro Gusto NA LLC, trading as Puro Gusto at 1345 F Street Northwest. It's the former Maison Kaiser location. Puro Gusto is going to be an upscale Italian cafe serving breakfast and all-day menu items, as well as having a selection of Italian beers, wines, and cocktails. The hours of operation the seating capacity in the interior is going to be 70, with a total occupancy load of 145. That's seating and standing. We're seeking a sidewalk cafe endorsement for a maximum of 30 seats. And the license also includes a request for an alcohol carryout and delivery endorsement. The hours of operation that we're seeking for both the interior and the exterior are 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. on the weekends. That's just for operation, because remember, there's breakfast being served. And the hours being sought for alcoholic beverage sales on both the interior and the exterior are 8 a.m. Till 2 a.m. during the week and 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. on the weekends. We do understand that that's a bit later than the outside. It's typical for this ANC, but given that it's so far removed from residences, we're hoping that there could be an exception made in this instance. And the hours sought for alcohol carryout and delivery are 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. during the week and 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Saturday. And we had initially requested the ANC's support for a stipulated ABC license, but that will no longer be necessary because construction has been delayed, so we're not opening until the fall, unfortunately. If there's any questions about the operations of the ABC license application, I'd be happy to field those. Frank's on the call as well if there's something specific to the operations I don't have knowledge of.
Matt, I'm just curious, with carryout and delivery, is that special endorsement? Or
so this is what happened during the pandemic, when restaurants and bars were able to start giving alcoholic beverages in closed containers as part of a carry-out or delivery order that contained a food item. In late March, instead of just being able to sign up for it, new applications had to actually sign up for a specific endorsement for it. So this is really nothing new than other establishments have been doing. It's just a new administrative procedure for it, so to speak.
Got it. So you could sell an alcoholic beverage to go. Basically.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, with as part of a sale, part of an order that contains a food item. So, if you're going to get a couple of sandwiches and salads, you can get a bottle of wine or an alcohol spritz to go as well. But you couldn't just go in and get a bottle of wine on its own.
Got it. Gotcha. It has to be with the food item.
Correct.
Perfect. Got it. Okay.
What about a soda with it?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry.
I was joking. I said, what about a soda with it? Not to mix it necessarily, but one person drinks soda, another person drinks the beer.
I don't think soda counts as a prepared food item, unfortunately. Yeah. That to be an actual prepared food item, something, at least like a salad or a sandwich or a smoothie.
And
smoothie. Okay.
Frank, when do you plan? You said in the fall, like September, you're thinking?
Yeah, we're shooting for September, October. Of course, we want to open as soon as possible, but it takes more time than any of us operators do. But I think October is a realistic time frame. So we should find that time.
And is this your first restaurant venture, or?
No. We're a part of a larger organization, Italian company called Autogrill, based in Milano. This brand is from Milano. We have about 50 locations around the world in Asia, Middle East, and Europe. So this is the first location in the U.S., and we picked DC for it. So you're getting an authentic Italian brand.
Exciting. Awesome. And that area, just for the other commissioners, is pretty much is void of residential areas. And I believe, if I'm correct in my envisioning, that the cigar lounge, is that on that block, or is it the next block down? I'm sorry, say what?
It's next door to the right if you're looking at this space.
Yeah. And that's open also until very late, 3 a.m. So I don't think the hours are inconsistent for the community standards there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you do
near the theaters too.
Yeah, near the theaters, and you don't need a stipulated license, correct?
Correct.
Great. So I would move that we send a letter of support for Puro Gusto at 1345 F Street Northwest for their Abra license.
Second.
Bellissimo.
Okay. And all in favor? Awesome. So 3-3-0. Awesome. Great. Thank you all so much. We'll get that right out for you guys.
Appreciate the support, commissioners.
Awesome. And we are recalling Bar Spiro from our last meeting. And I believe Ellie has an update for us on that.
Yeah, so for folks who weren't here last meeting, we just had a question about how late we were going to do the outdoor cafe hours, because I believe the requested hours was until 1 a.m. and we typically do 2 p.m. when there's residences nearby, and it appeared the Ashton apartments are nearby. But I got in touch with the property manager there and she had no concerns with it. Also, got some more information about actually how close it was and where the locations are, and it doesn't seem to raise a problem. So I'd also note that Attorney Menorah also gave us some information about a cafe with alcohol, so I guess bar underneath residences at 300 Mass Ave, which the same property manager, it actually happens to be the same property manager for that location as the Ashton, and she said there haven't been issues due to that. So I have no problem with the requested hours and think we should just do a letter of support.
Great.
I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
Matt, could you just remind us the hours?
Sure. So the hours that we're seeking for both the inside and the outside are 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. daily.
9 a.m. to 1 a.m. for inside and outside.
Correct. And it's a sidewalk cafe.
Right.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry. It's a summer garden, not a sidewalk cafe. It's on private property.
Got it. Got it. And were you making a motion, Ellie?
Sure, yeah, I'll motion to send a letter of support.
And I'll second that. All those in favor? Awesome. So 3-3. And do you need a stipulated license?
No, we don't. This will be open well after the protest headline is finished. But thank you.
Got it.
The offer.
Got it. Awesome. So we will get that sent off right away as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, commissioners. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. An item that I just wanted to alert the fellow commissioners about, I copied you on this and spelled Ellie's name incorrectly for the 5th time, I think. Apologies so much. The ANC did send a letter of protest for Taste LLC. They have been unable to reach a community agreement by the time that the protest period was about to expire. And per our March meeting, we voted to protest it if a community agreement was not in place. I will say that both the property, the Mather Studios residents, have been working very diligently, and they are close to an agreement. So we do have a roll call hearing the end of the month, which I'll be, as soon as I get final word on that, I'll just be sending a copy of that to the fellow commissioners if they wish to join that. But if a letter of agreement is reached, then we will withdraw that protest per the March meeting. Any questions from the commissioners or others? All right.
Michael, I wasn't there. Where is this place?
It's within Mather Studios.
Is it the one that's there right now?
That is correct.
Oh, okay.
They're occupying additional space and extending hours.
Got it.
We have no transportation or public planning concerns. I like to move on to support for the Public Arts Project in 2C and Recall Gateland. There she is.
Louder this time.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks. Thank you.
I wanted to share a project with you all this evening that we are working on at the Downtown DC Business Improvement District. It is a partnership with a local artist called Lisa Marie Thalhammer. You all may have seen her work. She has about a dozen murals throughout the district. One of them is in Blagden Alley. It is the Love mural. It is love in big bright letters. It spells out the word love. That's probably her most famous. We are initially working with her to do a mural festival in downtown. So I wanted to bring this idea to you all at this early stage to see if you were supportive of it. And the idea is to have 4 to 6 local artists do murals on walls that are otherwise blank in the downtown area. We hope to have them close to Franklin Park to kind of piggyback off of the energy surrounding the reopening of Franklin Park. That should happen at the end of this summer. You can see a rendering of part of the park behind me, if you happen to not know what that was, which I assume you probably didn't. So the plan is, as I said, for a mural festival that will feature 4 to 6 local artists. It would be curated by Lisa Marie Thalhammer herself as a local artist, of course. And the theme would be ladies first. So it would be all female women artists, and they would do murals of impressive women in history that have had some sort of an influence in the area. And so this concept is exciting to us. We've done another project recently. I know Commissioner Newhouse knows about it with the call boxes in downtown DC as well. And that featured women in history in the area too. And was a really lovely project to be able to be a part of, as I just came on to staff at the time that it was wrapping up. But that celebration of women in history in the area was a really powerful one. We saw a lot of recognition for a need for that exposure and acknowledgement of women in history. Generally, statues in our town have mostly supported and celebrated white men. And so we were happy to be able to focus on a project that celebrated women and women of color. And we would want to do the same here with this project as well. So that's our initial concept. We don't have images, but we are hoping to go for a public art building communities grant. That deadline will come up later in July. And then as we go through the concept development leading to the festival, we would have more images to share for reaction.
And you're looking for a letter of support to accompany the grant application. Is that correct?
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
I did have a question.
Sure, please.
So are these walls that the bid has identified and received, consent for? Are these private buildings or public or what?
They would be private buildings. I'm working with a couple of different property owners to gain consent. That has not been completely confirmed yet, but I have heard a lot of positive feedback and excitement around it. But we would 1,000% need those letters of commitment for the walls for the grant, and it would be private.
Okay, and I'm assuming the artwork is going to be permanent, right? Or no?
It depends. I mean, it's just paint, so it could be painted over.
Okay, I didn't know if the intention was for it to be permanent public art or a temporary installation.
We would prefer to see it be up for 5 years plus. I think murals are a little hard to, 100% ask to be permanent because of the deterioration that's ultimately likely.
Sure.
But yeah, we would like them to have a long life.
Okay, and then my last question is, so are the murals going to be painted like all in one day, or is it over a period of time?
It'll probably be a 2-week period.
Okay.
We'll do it as a mural festival. And so we'll have events and activations with it.
And how long is the festival for?
It'll probably be about 2 weeks.
Oh, so, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question. Okay. I was curious how, I know you mentioned the artist herself would be curating it, but if there would be any input or how the actual historical figures that would be displayed would be determined, and if there were any, organizations or anyone giving input to that. I know it sounds like being inclusive is an aim for the project, but I didn't know if that was thought about.
Yeah, it's a great question. Given the emphasis on the artists themselves that are participating, we would leave it up to the artists to select with curatorial oversight by Lisa Marie Thalhammer.
Can I make a suggestion here as to inclusion? We have a place called the DC History Center. It's housed in the former public library that's on Mount Vernon Square. They've got a lot of history there about women as well as men, about DC. And it seems to me, since we have already an existing organization who can contribute lots of information about the women who were primarily more prominent in their efforts to help society in the city, or pick another idea, policy, that would be very helpful than having an artist who's not really in the field of history she is really an artist, make the choice. Or at least give them 3 choices. Maybe give each artist 3 choices, but something that helps to identify the artist, identify the historic aspect of that person's work that was important to the city, and not leave that all up to the artist. I think it's sort of unfair to the artist, in fact, and it's unfair to the city, both. So that's my suggestion.
Okay. We're happy to work with the DC History Center as well.
I'll move a motion to do a letter of support, unless Michael or Gigi had another question.
No.
Or comment.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And Galen, can you, I don't know if you've sent this to me, can you send me who that letter would be going to?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll get you a copy.
Okay. Thank you so much.
With the bid.
Thank you so much. Next on our agenda is a request for resolution support for the Metro DC DSA and Defund MPD Coalition. And Benjamin Merrick. Hi,
yep,
Ben.
That's me.
Hi.
I have some slides to share.
Sure,
as well.
Please.
All right.
I think I still have you active there to share. Yes.
Yep. All right. So, hello all. My name is Ben Merrick. I'm an organizer and activist with Metro DC, Democratic Socialists of America. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Defund MPD Coalition. So first, thank you for having me. It's been a long meeting. It's a nice night. Really appreciate you here. And I'm going to provide an overview of our ongoing campaign, our vision, and our goals before opening the floor to any questions you all might have. And for the residents still listening in, there's a lot of discussion earlier. I hope that you can stick around and listen in with an open mind, because I'm going to present a different way of thinking about public safety. So I thought it best to start by noting who we are in the coalition. The Defund MPD Coalition is a Black-led, multiracial coalition of people and organizations brought together by a shared vision for the future. We envision a future in which everyone has what they need, everyone is safe, and this is a future without prisons and police. Now, we know that that is a lofty goal, that is a big vision, and it's going to be a while to get there. And so what I'm going to present today is a concrete set of demands, roadmap for what we're asking for right now. And I'll just say that the people who compose our coalition come from very different parts of the city, all 8 wards, different walks of life, yet we all share the understanding that the status quo is not okay, that things need to change, that we need a fundamental transformation in how we create public safety. And we all share an ardent desire and commitment to fight for that change. And just concretely, the coalition is composed of 29 local community organizations and counting. It's folks like Black Lives Matter DC, Working Families Party, Stop Police Terror Project, DC Justice Lab, Nonprofit Professional Employees Union, Sunrise Movement, Metro DC DSA, where I organize, and many, many more. So this is our core demand. We want to create real public safety by defunding MPD and refunding our community. In other words, divest from police and invest in the kinds of life-giving resources that actually make places and people safe. And I'll go ahead and walk through each of these six categories of demands here that you see on the right. Now, throughout this, I'm not going to read through all of our sub-goals and solutions. We have a website, defundmpd.org, and detailed roadmap available for any of you interested in learning the specifics of the changes we're demanding. Instead, I'll use this time to speak on why each of these things are important. So our first major goal is that we want to reduce the MPD budget by 50% over the next 3 years. The FY21 approved budget was $546 million. That's over $500 million. So we want to take about 270 million of that over 3 years and redirect it towards programs, resources, services that actually make for safe communities. So why is this important? Well, if you've been awake for the past year, you know that there's a plague of police brutality around the country. And frankly, there always has been, so long as police have existed. Police murder about 1,000 people every year in the United States. And despite many different kinds of procedural reforms in the last decade, that number has not budged. And the reason for that is actually really quite simple. Policing is not actually about public safety. For those on the receiving end of police work, everything that police do exists on a spectrum of violence, from their guns to their tasers, to their nightsticks, handcuffs, to stop and frisk, or its DC incarnation of jump outs, to rampant surveillance, or even just the persistent threat of all of these things in DC's poorest and predominantly Black neighborhoods. All of those things are violent. And so we understand that policing is violence work. And the specific function of police is to use that violence to maintain what we have as a vastly unequal, racialized social order, to protect property over people. Now, contrary to what most of us grew up believing, police violence is not waged against, the bad people. It is waged against the Black, the brown, the poor and working class, trans and non-binary folks, and the otherwise marginalized. And so with that understanding, the status quo becomes both astonishing and unacceptable. For the past half century, we have continually divested from true public goods like housing, healthcare, and education, and invested and ramped up the size and scope of policing and prison infrastructure, all under the false premise of public safety. This is the age of mass incarceration. And the result is less safety, not more. So what we are demanding is to reverse this trend, to divest from police instead and reinvest in the collective welfare of the people. And our remaining goals will fill that out with some details about how we'd like to see that done. So let's talk about our next goal, which is to educate with care and compassion. This one honestly requires little explanation. It should be painfully obvious that putting people with guns or other violent tools in a school is a terrible idea, and it has been terrible in practice. It does not prevent school shootings, but it does criminalize a hell of a lot of kids. It accelerates the school to prison pipeline. It forecloses on the futures of kids who get caught up in that dragnet. Now, DC spends about $23 million a year on school cops. We need to bring that to an immediate end and instead invest that money in truly good public education resources. More school counselors, more pay for teachers, expanding trauma-informed support and behavioral health programs in schools. Next, we have our goal to fund our communities. Again, this comes from the understanding that about where real safety comes from. And you can think about this in terms of your own life and what makes you feel safe. I, for one, do not feel safe when I'm in a place teeming with badges and guns. I feel safe when I and everyone around me has what we need to live healthy, dignified lives and to have healthy relationships with each other. What the Defund MPD Coalition is all about is doing what police do not and cannot do, which is addressing the root causes of harm and violence. Because to really do that, we need to invest in healthcare, housing, education, jobs and incomes, healthy and sustainable environments. And we can use our tax dollars to strengthen, improve, and heal our communities rather than continuing to brutalize DC's people with police and prisons. So next we have unify the community. Contrary to what you might read in breathless op-eds denouncing the defund movement, those of us doing this work are not naive and fully recognize and affirm that interpersonal violence happens. We're just actually proposing ways to address that violence that might actually work. DC has the most police per capita than anywhere in the country and possibly anywhere in the world. So if police prevented violence, we'd be the safest place too, but we're not. So we know it doesn't work. Here's what will work. non-police trauma-informed crisis responders, expanded investment in violence interruption programs, community-based harm reduction services, things like that. We also need to decriminalize acts of survival. Now, I know this was the subject of a lot of the early part of this meeting tonight. Things like homelessness, drug use, street vending, sex work. The criminalization of these behaviors does not prevent them. It does not lessen them. These behaviors have been criminalized to an astounding degree for decades in this country. And yet here we are still talking about them. They still exist. They're still prevalent. So all that criminalization does is harm people, and asking us to do the same thing we've always done, but just more of it, is going to simply harm people more. We need to decriminalize people and support them. The bottom line is that police and prisons serve to disappear marginalized people into cages. What we're asking the city to do instead is to get to work truly addressing the root causes of harm and violence in our communities, and we know how to do that. So that brings me to the next goal, which is about nonviolence in all public services. As I explained earlier, policing is violence work. They do not prevent violence, they perpetuate it. And that's because for decades, our system of policing, surveillance, punishment, and incarceration has shaped the law to oppress the public, and especially the most marginalized. But we know law is a tool. It can be used instead to reduce police violence. So in addition to refunding our communities, we are demanding that our city's legislation be used to remove police from social services, traffic enforcement, wellness checks, and emergency response. We also want to limit police power and end their unethical behaviors. We want to expressly end stop and frisk, or as I mentioned earlier, DC's incarnation of that, which are jump outs. We want to end chemical weapon use, period. And we want to stop MPD from using their allowance of budget overages to just ignore the budget limits that exist on all other public institutions. And finally, we want to stop this practice of giving special rights for cops. They are civilians like anyone else. They should have no special right to exclusive legal protections. And finally, we are calling on our elected officials to lead bravely. That also includes ANC commissioners. We elected you, we elected the council, we're paying attention. Public service is a call to listen and to lead. It is not a call to defend an unequal and oppressive status quo. And we know that the police wield an immense amount of power, not only in the streets, but also politically. And so we are asking for bravery here, but there is simply no way to achieve real public safety without this kind of brave leadership to transform our city. So I will wrap there for now, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
I think we're just going to limit folks to one comment. So try to make sure you make your point in the time you speak. Do you mind, Ben, ending that share screen just so I could see more folks? I see 2 hands. Howard, do you want to go?
Yeah, Chief Conte said that the strength of the Metropolitan Police Department, they're 350 officers short right now. The strength now is below 3,600. 350 officers have left the force in the last year, basically demoralized by the attacks on the police like we heard just a minute ago. We need 4,000 according to Chief Conte, and he's supported by Mayor Bowser. I think that the presenter here has not made a case for a defunding of the police. He's made a case for anarchy on the streets, mayhem, and people taking arms to defend themselves. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Thomas. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to? Sorry,
no, go ahead.
Want to respond to that, Ben?
Yeah, I'm not making the case for any of that whatsoever. What I'm making the case for is actual public safety. Again, you discussed a lot of issues in this forum at the beginning of this meeting that are still prevalent in Ward 2, where I live. And we've been doing the same thing for many decades. It's time for a fundamentally different approach.
Thomas, I think I was about to call on you if you wanted to go.
Yeah, where has this been tried in the United States recently, and what have been the results? And I'm asking for like specific examples. I'm thinking of, perhaps Seattle, where this has been tried, but what I hear from Seattle and perhaps even San Francisco or even parts of Los Angeles, I haven't been getting very encouraging news from those cities. And we're dealing with an area of the city where we've kind of bore the brunt of a lot of the activity that happened last summer. And I can remember how, a liquor store was looted in plain sight of many of my neighbors. And thank goodness the police showed up when they did, because there were people living above that liquor store. And if anyone had, lit a spark, I mean, that entire building could have gone up and given the amount of liquor on that premises. So please tell me if there are specific examples of where this has worked. And, and lastly, I just maybe make a point. I don't see the city's invested a huge amount of money this past year or this upcoming year on expanding social services. Maybe it's not mutually exclusive. Maybe we could do what the city is trying to do, and at the same time maintain, the police force that we have, or even reform or help augment them or help them improve. I don't want to. I'm afraid that going down the approach you're suggesting creates an unnecessarily antagonistic approach with our law enforcement officials, which many of us were very grateful for last summer and during the events of January 6th.
So I have several things to say about that. First, to your first question about where has this been tried? First of all, the things you are reading about in most other cities, there has not been meaningful defunding in any city in the US. So the scaremongering that you have heard about is simply doesn't make sense. The police have not meaningfully been defunded yet anywhere. And the degree to which you have seen rising crime rates and things like that is because, well, we've been in an extraordinary year. People, millions of people are out of work, increasingly desperate, all of these things that we are saying that they're having their needs unmet. And that is causing people, that is causing incidences of violence and other things. Now, as to the question of where can we see examples of this, go to any less policed neighborhood. If you go to a neighborhood that you think of as safe, it is not one that is teeming with cops, right? And so when you think about your own neighborhood and the problems that you see there, what we are saying is, what are all of the positive, beneficial resources? How do we actually meet everyone's needs, not just the homeowners, but the people who are unhoused? The approach we've done in this country is to say, let's disappear the problem. Let's throw the people in a cage. What we are saying is, let's give people a home. Let's understand what their actual needs are in the first place. And the last point I want to make is that we have to recognize that policing is not just a bad solution to these problems. It is a persistent daily threat to Black and brown people, to marginalized people. They actually make life much worse for people. They're a violent threat to many members of our community. And so that's why the defunding is as important as the investing in all of the positive things.
Okay, see Austin Himes.
Thanks very much. So, as I think that at least, Mike Schenkel, where I live, which is right behind the shelter where we have a lot of these problems. And I know that I see a lot of issues that require police presence. But just want to briefly say, Benjamin, there's a lot of folks in my building, and myself included, who support the things that you're talking about. I understand that the defund the police message is itself divisive, and it's sometimes hard for people to look past that banner to understand the complexities of what's being advocated for. So again, just to briefly say, we support that and also support our police. And I don't think that's I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think we can do both. So thank you for advocating for reallocating some of that $500 million that's going to MPD.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I'll just add that what we're advocating for is a transition, right? We're advocating for a 50% reduction over 3 years, and at the same time, a simultaneously investment in things that actually create safety.
Yeah, I appreciate that aspiration. And this is complex, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And I see Joanne has a hand up.
A couple of things. First is our legislation has to go through Congress. What you're proposing in the manner that you're proposing doesn't seem to me like it would get through Congress. I'm sure the police have a lot more people who would get on the bandwagon lobbying their congressmen against this. That's number one. Number two, I have personally had situations that occurred to me where I was very happy that there was a policeman on the beat, because I think that ended up stopping things. I have been attacked on the street. Now, that was a long time ago when this was a very peaceful community. I'm in my late 70s now, and that was when I was in my mid-20s. So we're talking a long time ago in DuPont Circle on 21st Street, not on a commercial street. And I was very fortunate that some older teenage guys happened to be walking out of their door, and they heard me screaming. And the guy who was trying to rob me didn't have his hand over my mouth. And I put my chin down so he couldn't grab my neck. So I've had personal experience where I've been very happy that there has been help. Now, in that instance, there wasn't a policeman, but there was help in a very, very nice residential street. So I think some of the examples that you're using and some of the reasoning doesn't necessarily always apply. And I can understand, but maybe not even 150%. I think that it's possible to do both. I think that from what I've seen from Montgomery County Police, where I lived for over 20 years, versus DC Police, I would much rather be talking to a policeman in DC than I would in Montgomery County. It is night and day. And so when you talk about DC Police, I have very high regard for them. I've had very good relationships with them. And that may have just been personal. That may not apply to everyone. And I understand that. But I don't see how what you're proposing in the manner in which you're proposing it would be able to get through, although I see facets of it that can be accomplished, and that there can be certain kinds of reductions with good education, both of people on the police force and in the manner in which they select people for the police force. That there aren't people who are wanting to get at someone else's throat. That's it. That was my comment.
Yeah, and so just on the legislative question, obviously there are many things we all wish DC was a state so that we had more power over the laws that impact our lives. Thankfully, as it happens, MPD, now there are many, many other federal police agencies in the city,
right,
which are meaningful and do impact our lives. But our campaign is about MPD specifically, the Metropolitan Police Department, which the city council and the mayor do have control over. So we can do this through council legislation.
But that's also why we have so many police per population, just like we have a lot of more lawyers than any other city in the United States per person, because we have the federal government here.
Yeah, and to your other comment, everybody has different experiences. And so these demands are not coming from a place of personal anecdote, they're coming from a place of understanding the broad systems at play, the data. everything that is going on collectively, rather than at the scale of an individual. Because we have to look at those things to understand what makes a just world, what makes a safe world. And we have tons of police and we don't have justice, we don't have safety.
But I'm asking you, if you talk about education, why not more education for the police? Why did you leave that out?
Is it possible to move past this? I know we've got an item. It's been a long night.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, we did say we were going to do one comment per person. I see your hand, Howard. You already spoke on this, so if you want to go ahead and email us commissioners, or I believe Benjamin's email is also in the agenda. That information is available to you. Michael or Gigi, did you have any comments before we move on?
I just wanted to ask Benjamin, you're looking, I guess the coalition is looking for our ANC to support the resolution that has been filtered through a couple of ANCs. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So we're looking for resolution support, and each ANC has done it a little bit differently. ANC 2B, which is my ANC, I worked very closely with them. They passed a resolution 8-0, mostly in pretty much like straight support for our roadmap. Other ANCs have focused their resolutions on supporting the outcome of the Police Reform Commission, which, while it doesn't go as far as those of us in the coalition would like, it is aligned, broadly speaking, with what we want, which is a divestment from the old ways of doing public safety and an investment in new, more beneficial ways of making public safety. And so I'd like to work with you all on crafting a resolution that makes sense, and getting that support from the ANC. Yep.
So I would just say that I can appreciate absolutely the goal of reimagining how we police our communities. It's something that a lot of us have given a lot of thought to. However, I do have to say that I do very much disagree with the name defund the police. I think it's divisive. I think it leads people who are probably not inclined to be as open-minded as you wanted them, as you mentioned in your opening. I think that name in and of itself is just about guaranteed to make sure that doesn't happen. So I think that, we would certainly have to discuss that. That's something that we'd have to discuss to see, where we can, if we can, align with your program.
Yeah, and I'm totally happy, that's to work those things out. We're interested in the goals and the roadmap. I'm not tied to the labels. Obviously, we have chosen that label deliberately because we believe the police themselves are antagonistic to our most vulnerable neighbors, to our marginalized communities, and their work is inherently antagonistic to us. But I totally understand that, and I'm very happy to work with that.
Yeah, and just in response to that, Gigi, I'm just kind of looking at 2B's resolution, for example, and I think the actual title of the resolution just says, create real public safety by reprioritizing MPD funding and investing in communities. So,
that sounds great.
I think
that's the idea.
Yeah, and absolutely, I am happy, and obviously we all would, go through and see what's been done before, what the other ANCs have done, and see where we can align with that.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would, I always, I'm a scientist by training, and I look at the problems and solutions that you presented, and I want to see the data behind them, the decisions that this coalition made based on data proven practice, best practice, etc. And I get into a situation where I'm like, well, I work with folks all the time that make these great plans, these crafty plans that put great language together. And it's a fantasy vision. And I really want to understand where those came from and how you came to develop those 4 or 5 action bullets there, and why you chose those to be the focus and not other items. That would be something that I would want to have a conversation with you about, because in the presentation manner, while I support that, I support the idea, the premise of investing in strategies to address structural challenges within our communities. Totally get it. I just need to know that we are not going to be putting ourselves into a situation in which we have anarchy on our streets, that we have a January 6th, a protest downtown in which our businesses are looted, and this is problematic. And I agree with Gigi wholeheartedly. The name is so divisive that even the 2B resolution sounds more appealing to be something to support than something that basically says the people that protected us and protected our businesses, or attempted to protect our businesses during the looting that occurred earlier this year, we want to take away their funding. I just can't get behind that just quite yet, but I'm willing to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to have that conversation. And I'd be thrilled, obviously if you all passed a resolution that was replicating the 2B resolution. So that's exactly what I'd like to see. And I think I should address January 6th, because I know that this is on a lot of folks' minds. 2C is a downtown district. It's really important. So there's a story about this that perhaps it has not been well told, which is that in 2018, 2019, and the waning months of 2020, the post-election period, in November and December, the white supremacists, sorry about my dogs, they came to DC, and what happened was that all right, now that my wife is inside, they will stop barking. So they came to DC, all these white supremacists, and every time they came, the MPD stood by and literally watched them commit violence against DC residents, against fellow organizers and activists, some of whom I know. All of the MPD's violence was directed against the people counter-protesting, the fascists and the white supremacists, not against those folks. And so the signal that sent, and it happened in November, it happened again in December 2020, the signal that sent was very clear. It said to groups like the Proud Boys, you come to our city, we're not going to do anything to you. And so I know that there were a few hours on January 6th in which the MPD was temporarily arrayed against these forces, and they happened to be useful in those 2 hours. But we cannot look at those 2 hours without looking at the years, literally, of actions in which the MPD essentially invited them all in. This is hard to understand because it's really easy to just think about just those 2 hours, but we can't disambiguate these things.
Right, and I would welcome to see that evidence.
Sure.
In that, so
yeah. Let's have a follow-up conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. So I think it would be best at this point if we were to table this until we can have more further discussions as commissioners and with Ben to determine if this is something that is how we would want to approach something like this, if at all, based on the comments that were presented here this evening. And we can elicit additional comments from our constituents as well as we kind of move through this process. But thank you very, very much for coming and presenting this model to us.
Yeah, thank you all, and thank all the residents for your engagement on this. I really, I know it's a challenging topic, and what I'm presenting can feel very different, and that can be scary. So I really appreciate everyone's engagement on this.
Awesome, thank you. And I kind of put Commissioner Nelson on the spot for our last item, and I apologize, Commissioner Nelson. I was on vacation when this last meeting happened about Pat Handy Center, and I didn't know if you wanted to provide an update on any of the documentation or anything that's happening there to the group.
So this is going to be a very short update because, I was not prepared to actually speak to it. And if there's anybody here on this call who was there as well, I think maybe one or two of you may have been. Please feel free to jump in and fill in the blanks, because there's probably going to be a lot. What I got out of that meeting basically is that as far as Ms. Bird and the people who are managing the temporary shelter, I think they have another name for it, but that's what I'm going to call it, is the temporary shelter at the Massachusetts address. They feel like things are overall going well. They have, as it's gotten warmer, obviously there's been a lot more activity in terms of the residents there being outside more, and so that has brought up some different issues with regards to noise and different things. But overall, it from what I gathered, it appears that things are, relatively pretty much under control. The central question of the night really was about the now men's shelter on our side of the ANC. And what they actually said in that meeting about that is that it is now actually under different management. So I had actually dialed in by phone, and so she said that if people wanted the name of the new management, to email her or put it in the chat. But since I had joined by phone, I didn't have that option. So yeah, so I emailed them the next day to get that information, to find out who's actually running the men's shelter now. And what they said was that In Street Village, which is the one that runs the women's shelter, they only run women's shelter. So, I mean, when I thought about it, it made sense. But as I mentioned to someone later, that I don't think that most of the people who were on that call were aware that the management would change once the management would change of the old location once they moved into the new location. So I still don't know who's actually running the men's facility, the one on what is that, 3rd Street now. So I'm still trying to get that information. So that's pretty much the update that I have. If anyone else was there on that call and has more extensive notes, feel free to jump in. Austin?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thanks. I know Mike doesn't have his camera on, but he, I think, has a pretty good recollection of that. I just want to give Mike, you want an opportunity, or you want me to hit this? All right, nothing heard. So yeah, I'm just going to reiterate, Gigi, I think you hit it on the head. There was a lot of confusion and surprise, basically, to hear that the folks who had been pretty successfully running that building right behind us, the shelter, for a number of years. I would describe it as shrugging. Pretty much just shrugged off the problem, said this is not our doing, this isn't us. And I think they also had some positive rationale there. It was not a meeting about the 5th Street location. Is that right, Gigi?
Right.
Right. It was not. Right.
So, so nothing really came of that. There were no positive advancements. There were good connections made, I would say, with you know, the people at the Patricia Handy Place for Women, you know, the prior management. But what I've heard is that permitting is a huge issue. I don't know if the ANC is able to move that along. I understand from Pinto's office that Ms. Pinto perceives the conditions inside the Patricia Handy Place for Women on 5th Street to be semi-derelict, which is perhaps why the bathroom situation is such a problem. And we heard, you know, from some other local folks, I think it was Reginald, who perceives the urination and public defecation to be a protest of the conditions in that location. So my understanding is that you know, they moved women out. They had slotted repairs. You know, through a series of unfortunate events, not only has the construction not begun, but they've moved some potentially, you know, significantly vulnerable men into the shelter. And you know, a lot of us on this call now are on a group thread for email, so this is not news to many of us. But we're really concerned about how we can best steward and support you know, these people who are living in the shelter and give them the best support that does not involve a jail cell, because you know, that can't just be another stop, you know, in the homeless life. Like, you need to be, I guess, carried forward. So that's just my 2 cents and what I remember. And now I see Mike has his microphone back.
Mike?
Oh, thanks. Hey, thanks, Austin. So yeah, I mean, Austin summarized it, and I will just highlight that. I mean, I think that we are the shelter. There's always been some kind of shelter as long as you know, as I've lived in the neighborhood, and as long as our building has been there at 810 5th Street. It was run by the Gospel Rescue Ministries for a long time. They managed to, I think, frankly, I mean, and then it was the Handy shelter run by the N Street Village folks, and now we have the temporary shelter. And in and of itself, like, there's no intrinsic condition with that shelter or that location that makes that a challenge. It's just, it has to be run, like, you have to do some, you know, good faith, common sense, like, straightforward management principles. And, you know, not expecting perfection. This is not, you know, a white picket fence neighborhood. No one in the neighborhood wants that kind of, you know, expects that, or even probably wants that kind of thing. But we have seen what, you know, kind of low cost, probably relatively minimal effort, but effective kind of mitigation techniques look like in the neighborhood, and it makes a big difference. The Gospel Rescue Ministries folks, and you know, and I brought this up a little bit at that meeting. I know that you know, that the N Street Shelter folks don't run this anymore with DHS. I think it's given the kind of contract or whatever for the site at 810th Street to a place called Pathways, and I've seen some of their emails. Some of the folks have been on the email thread that Austin talked about. They frankly have not been very responsive, not been responsive to me at all on email, and I think I've been relatively reasonable there. So I don't know what is required to get them involved or to come to a meeting like this. But again, the Gospel Rescue Ministries folks, it was, you know, kind of far from perfect in the neighborhood, but they took just, you know, a level of care to having, you know, cleaning out their dumps, you know, getting a dumpster checked out, walking around the neighborhood, engaging the folks, engaging with the other folks in the community, trying to help, you know, kind of, they viewed themselves as kind of invested in that immediate area of the block, and did some just general stuff. I, being a member of the board of our building, talked to them on a, you know, not a routine basis, but every so often we knew them. We did stuff over there, and they knew who was vulnerable. They knew who was preying on who. They were able to funnel that information to people who cared about it. And because really there is, you know, once you kind of have the you know, your 10% that are causing like the huge locus of crime, once you kind of are able to contain, mitigate the effects from those folks, a lot of other things tend to fall into place. We're not seeing any of that with the current folks at the shelter at 810, the guys, Path Race folks. And they don't appear, I know they said that they got new trash dumpsters, which are insufficient. And whatever they're doing in their local area, you know, their immediate like 5-foot patrol of the exterior of the building is also not sufficient. So I think, you know, I know practically from practical experience, there is kind of like pretty straightforward measures that can make the happens. And trust me, bathroom access is a big part of this. I know this is an issue. Maybe that, I don't know what the bathrooms are like in that building now. They used to have them. I have personally talked to multiple folks, men on the neighborhood, and asked, like, can you guys use the restroom? And I've been told by at least 2 to 4, I think, that they don't believe, or at least they're not aware, that they can use the bathroom during the day in the shelter.
So I think, Mike, I think what probably might be best at this point, since we are kind of running pretty late, is I think what I'm going to do. Yeah, I realize
that. Sorry.
No problem. I think what I'm going to do is circle back with Pathways and actually try to strong on them or ask them really nicely again to get the name of who's managing the men's shelter now, and invite that person to our July meeting. And, you know, perhaps they can provide some updates as to what's happening there. I think that's probably our
we probably need a meeting probably before then. We're going to have a violent incident. We're going to have a violent, like, honestly, we're probably going to have a violent incident before then. I mean, I think the chance is pretty high. Honestly, it is as bad as that.
Absolutely. And so what I will do is I will get in touch with her and put her in touch with your team and see if we can't, you know, make a meeting happen sooner rather than later. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda, Mike.
Right.
So if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, but I think that's a great idea that we should move forward with a special meeting with them like we are doing with Pat Handy. So at this point, there are no other agenda items, I believe. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I will second that. All in favor? Yay. Thank you all. I appreciate you all hanging in there with us until the end tonight. Thank you all so much.